have a good old Rob to talk you through all this.
some guy, Rob Russo, some leftist based in Canada. I was turned on to this sick individual, and I found this.
Two, check. Check 2. Hello. Doing a no talking stream. That's right. That's exactly what I'm doing. Kiyoshi Warrior, thank you for the raid. What is up? Thank you for joining us. And thank you to Slightly Tethered as well. Slightly Tethered. Thank you for the 16 months tier 1. Hello. Thank you. Saw the VOD and the crash. That upset me as well. Yeah, it's weird. My computer's been... It can mostly handle the cyberpunk, but not quite. Not quite. It loses it sometimes. It was no problem, Brian. I hope the stream was good. I hope you established communism in the Tropico Isles. Hello, Dave. How's it going? And hello, everyone. What is up? Dakadoon's walking the doggo. That's nice. What's the doggo's name, Dakadoon? Oh, I'm still sick. I'm still sick. And I left my Diet Coke in the other room. Just one sec. Did you have a good cyber sleep? Not so bad. Not so bad. Again, like I'm just not feeling well right now, so not feeling well, so that's kind of impacting everything. And again, didn't super want to do the stream. Again, I'm in the mode right now where I would probably, if I was up to me, I would just be kind of like lying down, but this is my commitment to you, the viewer, the listener, the community member. This is my commitment to you. Rain or shine, whether I'm on death's door or not, here I am. I just actually ordered a Dagwood sandwich. I'm looking forward to getting that. Thank you, Hassan. Anyway, there's just plenty of stuff to talk about as well. Plenty of stuff to talk about. It would be foolish to not log in here to talk about it. Did you get an Italian? I got a like the Dagwoods chain. They have like an official sandwich, the Dagwood sandwich, which is a number of different kinds of deli sliced meats and cheese and official Dagwood sauce. And mayo. Oh, it's good. It's a really good sandwich. I definitely recommend if anyone's up here in Montreal to check out Dagwood's. It's a very good sandwich chain. Very, very good. Slightly Tethered, you know this is a pro mayo stream. You know it is. I'm a big mayo proponent here, and I'm not going to take any of this slander. Okay, even if you are a valued community member, a subscriber, I'm not going to take this anti-mayo revisionism. Okay? It's delicious. I enjoy it. It makes every single sandwich better. Well, maybe not every single sandwich, but the vast majority of sandwiches can be improved with a little mayo. Sometimes more than a little, frankly. I enjoy it a lot. Yeah, not a PB and J. Not a PB and J. That would not be very good. I've seen some people apparently like there's some parts of America, there's this weird cultural thing where there's people have mayo and banana sandwich, which, you know, I like mayo, but that's not something that I have interest in. I don't know. I'm not interested in trying that. I'm a big mayo proponent, but I'm not gonna go that far with it. You know? Peanut butter and banana, of course, yeah, it's wonderful. You even throw some bacon on there. You know who loved those? Elvis, an American icon. Elvis. Loved those. And for a good reason. They're really good. Mayo on fries, exactly. Thank you. How else to eat French fries? I don't know. Couldn't be me, though. I feel like peanut butter on a burger is like something that I would like, but I just don't know if I've ever gotten the opportunity to try it. It sounds very intriguing, though. Chips and cheese, a UK staple. Well, we have poutine here. Okay, we have poutine. And yeah, if I'm having poutine, then it has gravy and cheese curds. If I'm having just fries, I'm going to have mayo with them, though. Sometimes ketchup, sometimes both. Ugh. Do you know the worst part? Like I'm not so sick that I'm like miserable or anything like that. But I get this like in my nose, you know, you get that feeling that you're going to sneeze, but then it doesn't come. And then sometimes it lasts for like a super long time. It's like you go for like 5 minutes with this feeling that you're like, there's a sneeze coming, but that just doesn't come. It's not cool. It is not cool at all. It's one of my least favorite things. I did take some like daytime cold medication right now, so I'm kind of flying high on that right now. Is it allergies? I mean, it could be. I just think it's like a sinus infection. That's kind of more what it feels like. I'm just very like, I don't think I'm allergic to anything. I know it's possible to develop allergies like later in life to certain things, but I don't think that's what it is. It's more just like my kid is in school and he had a cough, and then he was hanging out with me, and we were sleeping in the same bed sometimes, and it's just like he gets his all gross germs all over me. So I think that's more likely what it is. I have some Tylenol sinus. That sounds nice. That sounds good. I did take some stuff this morning, but I feel like it didn't have as much of an impact that I needed it to. You know? I feel like I got high from it, but didn't actually resolve any of the sinus issues. Which, you know, hey, I'm not going to complain. You know? Ugh. I might actually have to go get some like Kleenex or something so I can blow my nose while I do this. It'll give me just one moment. I can do that. How's anyone else doing? Anyone else got any sicknesses? Any physical ailments you want to get into? You want to get off your chest? Let me know about your physical ailments or mental. We can hear about those too. Things like these make me glad I haven't created children yet. Well, that's the tricky part about having kids, is that you don't get a lot of sleep. It's expensive. You know, you don't have a lot of time to yourself. All the things that they say about parenting, very true. But at the same time, you get the little guy or a girl, and they love you, and you become friends with them, and they develop a little personality, and you hang out and spend time together, and that's cool. I would rather have that. I don't mind all the getting sick and the being tired and stuff, because I really actually enjoy that. So I pulled an oblique like 5 months ago and it's taking forever to heal. I try to avoid coughing and sneezing. Oh, it sounds really unpleasant, Moss. That sounds really unpleasant. I have a sickness. It's called working in a capitalist hellhole called the UK. We call that alienation. That's right. We all got a bit of that, I think. Dave feels good. That's good. The knee is rough. Dakadoon. My right knee is not good. Feeling a little better now that the weather's shifting a little bit. It's not quite so cold, so I might get less joint and pain and stuff like that. My left hip popped out on stream last night after a rib raid. As soon as the raid comes, Brian's body just immediately just like stops functioning. My mood is up with spring arriving and I'm doing yoga again. That's good. I should probably be doing yoga too, Carrier Wave. And yeah, the spring arriving thing is a big boost. At the same time, though, the last couple of days, it's been super gray and windy. It was beautiful on Monday. And it was warm and sunny and it was really nice. And now it's just like gray and super windy and still not that warm. It's like, ugh. Give me a break. Just came off a 3-hour hike. Endorphins are up. Well, that's good. That's good. We support that. It's 20 in Toronto. That's nice. I'm happy for you. Amazing in the flatlands. That's good. I'm happy for you. Still, we're not getting it. It's just gray. It's the gray William Gibson cyberpunk sky over here in Montreal right now. You know? So I did make an appointment to get my hair cut tomorrow, although now I'm having the curse. Now that I, like, for whatever reason, I've been, like, really not happy with my longer hair over the last couple of weeks, and now I'm looking at it being like, oh, it's not so bad. But I have to get it cut. It's the summer coming. I can't continue with this. I gotta do it. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Carrier Wave. I gotta get it cut. I told you, I gotta get official pictures taken soon. It's just too much. And right now it's all right, but I feel like tomorrow if I tried to do the same thing, it would be not good. I gotta get rid of it. Sorry. I have to. It's the summer anyway. The summer's coming anyways. I gotta get ready for that. Pictures for what? Joining the CIA. I mean, that implies that I'm not already joined. You know? Just tracking my delivery here. Very much looking forward to this sandwich. We can hang out and chit chat. The C in CIA stands for Canada. That's right. It does. We can chit chat for a while. I'm gonna eat my sandwich in a few minutes when that gets here. Then we can get into the important discourse of the day. Lots of geopolitical news going on. I think we can dig into all kinds of good stuff. All kinds of good stuff to get into here. I got the hot chicken carbonara bulldog and it's too spicy. That's the one that I have. Which is crazy, Carrier, because they do Buldak does a twice as spicy flavor. They do a 2 times spicy. Is that what you're talking about? Or you're just the regular one? Because the regular is quite spicy, but to me, I enjoy it though. Just the regular. Yeah, it is very spicy, but I like it a lot though. The Canadian Interference Association. That's right. That's correct. I've had it and it's too much. It's artificially spicy, no flavor, all fire. I think I'm going to have to just try it though. I think I'm going to have to try the twice as spicy kind. just for entertaining content for the audience, so you can just see me suffer. I can suffer on camera, and then I can accept monetary donations to support me. It could clear the head cold. That's true. It would be good right now. Edutainment. That's what this whole program is, isn't it? Ugh. I did take a break from my instant noodles today. I could have had another buldak for right now to enjoy, but didn't. There's a 3 times spicy buldak, and it pretty much says on the package that they made it for content creator food challenges. Yeah, that would be too much. That would be definitely too much. And I'm sure the 2 times is too much because the regular is quite spicy.
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob.
Oh my
talk
goodness!
You through all this.
P badge, P badge, P badge, P badge, P badge, P badge. Onward to the 3-year poo badge.
John, thank you. Thank you for the 24 months resub at tier 2 and for all the support and for everything you do with the community, John. Thank you. Enjoy your highly elite, highly exclusive 24-month TRRS sub badge. You've earned it. You've earned it, sir. Highly elite, highly exclusive, and it's golden. The golden sub badge. Beautiful. It is pretty cool seeing all the 2-year sub badges in the chat. I must say I do really enjoy it. I do really enjoy it. The golden, triumphant, elite badge. Pretty cool. Two entire years, you know, been doing this. Pretty hard to believe. It's pretty hard to believe. It's been a hell of a ride. Oh, man. There's so much to talk about, but I probably am going to have to find more like videos to look at because like I can't sit here and talk for the next 4 hours. I just can't do it. I can't do it as much as I would like to. Nowhere near the All Elite badge, but glad I joined the community for some sanity. Well, you're a mere 14 months away, Dimitri. A mere 14 months away. You know? Next summer. That's next summer, Dimitri. You're going to be laughing. You're going to be laughing all the way to the bank. With your elite exclusive 24-month sub badge. Glad I joined the community for some sanity. I'm happy that you're in the community too, Dimitri. I'm happy too. Brian's got a mere 21 months. A mere 21 months to go. And Matt the Quick, exactly. One of the noobiest of the noobs on here. Well, we're happy to have you, Matt, as well. And as I say to lurkers and non-subs that see the elite exclusive 24-month golden sub badge and say, well, I wish that was me. Well, the first step to getting the 24-month badge is that first month. That's the first step. And you've taken the first step. That's the most important one. And 2 years from now, Matt, 2 years from now, in April of 2025, Matt the Quick, you too will be the recipient of a brand, because obviously you're still going to be here, and obviously I am as well, and obviously everyone in the chat will be as well.
You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
29 long months, and every day I pray for Rob to end the stream forever.
April 2025, Matt the Quick will be the recipient of a brand new 24-month sub badge. G. Kleppy, thank you very much for the 29 months of Tier 1 and all the endless support that you've shown the community, which you love. Thank you. I appreciate it. G Clubby, like a few months ago, you recommended in the Discord. I don't know if you're still even playing this game. You recommended this word game Spell Tower, and ever since then, I've become so addicted to it. I've got a huge streak in that game. I've got a 147-day streak.
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
And I think it was at like a 70-day streak or something, and then I missed a day by accident. Oh, you're still obsessed with it? Oh, that's good. Oh, thank you, Dimitri, for the gifted sub. Thank you. I'm glad to know you're still going with that. I should get my mom into it as well. Oh, excuse me. I'm just going to blow my nose again so I don't keep sniffling into the mic like it's super gross to have to listen to. Moms do love word games. That's right. Hang on one moment, folks. Okay, sorry. I'm back. Sorry, I just put a little music just so there was something, rather than just silence and an empty chair there. Ugh. Yeah, well, it's funny that you say that about Ukraine, Dimitri, the Ukraine stuff. I saw there's a big like discourse war going on right now, and I saw all these like there's these like sort of dirtbag leftist types that are like now I guess big Ukraine supporters, and we're like criticizing people that were talking about things like NATO and talking about the run up to Ukraine, the conflict breaking out. And it's just so funny to me to be like not only like a leftist, but one of these like cool hipstery leftists and supporting NATO. And people being like, "Oh, your opinion is just irrelevant." You know, you support. If it's like you're literally supporting NATO. I don't know. It's like I don't know how much more clear you have to be. If you're like, I'm a leftist, I'm a Marxist, and you're supporting NATO, then like just something has gone wrong. Something has gone seriously wrong. There's been so much of that this year. Yes, I'm against Russia's imperialist invasion in Ukraine, which is the way that they say that they support NATO without saying that they do, you know? But couldn't be me anyways. Couldn't be me. I guess people still really struggle with this, though. Gothengel Sinner, hello. Yeah, I don't even want to speculate on the role that the possible infiltration in the Brooklyn podcast community. It's just impossible to even speculate on it without sounding like a lunatic. But while not wanting to speculate on it, if anything was ever proven about that, I would certainly be intrigued and probably not very surprised by the findings of it. Leftist at this point means vibes-based healthcare wanter. That's right. It's just like, that's all. It's just like I'm a liberal and I want better healthcare. I want a government-run healthcare program. Which, you know, go for it if that's what you want to do. But I think just dressing it up in this kind of like ideological thing, I think that's kind of funny.
You've just become an elite member of the Friendship Triangle.
Brian, oh my goodness, thank you for the 5 gifted subs. That's so kind of you, Brian. Thank you. We were saying it's you know, surprising that you haven't been in the community that long, Brian, but I really appreciate all the support, seriously. Socially Marxist, fiscally imperialist. I was following this whole argument. There's one person that I follow was posting about this and was stirring up a hornet's nest of all these people. I like, part of me wants to get into it and look at all the takes, but at the same time, it's just fucking brain poison. So I don't even want to bother, but I wouldn't say Chapo. No, I mean, Chapo has taken a lot of criticism actually for like talking about the Nord Stream pipeline, for example. And not really taking this big anti-Ukraine stance. I don't really listen to the podcast, but I don't think that they've really ever, I think probably they've been cagey about it if I had to guess, but I think there's people definitely in that community though. They're that part of that kind of sort of crowd, or as vague as that is. I was kicked out of IU's campus progressives for questioning the narrative. Western progressives, China and Russia are totalitarian states where the people suffer from authoritarianism. It's an interesting state of affairs, isn't it? Okay, you know what we should do? Because one of the things that I wanted to focus on, oh fuck, there's the whole Trump and Tucker thing. Maybe I can save that for later. I did see though that, because I wanted to talk about Macron visiting China, and now you have Lula visiting China, and Macron's changing tune about Ukraine on that subject. And the way that I think Macron is realizing that, like, the more you tie yourself to the United States, the worse things are going to get for you over the next coming years and decades. Macron's kind of getting the message, and Ukraine has been, I think, a grim reminder of how that dynamic works. Backing America and backing the West on Ukraine has been a disaster for them. And now you have Macron visiting Xi and saying all kinds of interesting things about decoupling from the U.S. and all stuff like that. And I know there's going to be a lot of appetite for that in Germany as well, who's also been fucked over by this relationship. So I think that's interesting. So why don't I see Ben has a video on that? Like I said, I'm going to eat my sandwich, and I don't want to talk all that much. So let's start with that. We can look at Ben Norton's video, aka Geopolitical Economy Report, on France's Macron visit. We can start with that. I've got some stuff about the coming Taiwan conflict to get into. That's exactly what I wanted to put on right now, Dakadoon. That's exactly what I wanted to put on. So why don't I do that? Okay. Why don't I do that? And my sandwich is going to be here any minute. We'll throw on that video. And there's going to be a lot of opportunity for discussion about this stuff throughout that. And then there's plenty more to do as well. I wanted to watch the whole, there's a thread about the Tucker and Trump interview as well. Maybe after the interlude later, we can do that as well. It's a good sandwich eating video. Good. That's good. Oh. So let's see. This is stupid, right? This is a stupid title. I'll display this. Don't worry, Ben. I will display the sandwich. Don't you worry. This is not good. You know what? We'll go with this. We'll go with this because this covers everything that we're going to be getting into. Need a French title. Le wokisme. Because it's not just Macron. I mean, we're talking about everything. So, I think it's an example of. Oh, you know what? Here we go. Here's a better example. Okay, there we go. That's a good title. Because this is the narrative that we're focusing on. Macron, the visit to China is one part of that narrative. And then we can get into Taiwan. We can get into Ukraine. There's the whole Ukraine files, all that stuff. Man, there's a lot of stuff to talk about. Let's put on this video with Ben, our friend Ben.
To mark up the size of the account.
De Gaulle of Empire is good as well. Thank you, Dimitri. So is our friend of the stream, Ben Norton from the Geopolitical Economy Report. Let's watch this, and it'll be a jumping off point for, I think, a lot of discussions that we wanted to have today.
France's President Emmanuel Macron visited China this April and met with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Following the meeting, Emmanuel Macron made comments to the Western media that has angered the United States and neoconservative politicians in Europe because he said that Europe needs to be independent of the US, and he said that Europe cannot simply be a follower or a vassal of the United States. Now,
if only someone in Canada would ever say this.
To hear.
That's something that I have never heard anyone say in Canada. Instead, the president comes to talk to us, and we're like, oh boy, thank you, sir. Even coming to visit us up here, eh? No one ever fucking makes this argument. So I guess I'm a Macron guy now. I don't know. I'm pivoting to being a Macron guy. You know, give him credit at least for like seeing the writing on the wall, right? We don't agree politically, obviously. Macron's a diehard neoliberal. We see what's happening in France right now where they're trying to raise the retirement age. And I think Ben's going to explore this as well, whether this is just rhetoric or whether they actually meaning to follow through on this. But give Macron credit for at least seeing the writing on the wall and able to articulate it and be like, we need a different strategy other than just doing whatever the U.S. tells us to do.
It is good to see that there are politicians in Europe who do recognize that they are basically being subordinated by the United States, which is helping to destroy their economy and trying to subordinate all of Europe to join the U.S. in its new Cold War on both China and Russia.
I don't know if Le Pen is, Le Pen's a monster as well, but is Le Pen going to be a U.S. puppet? I don't know. I'm not sure.
Risk here. These comments by Macron are being taken as historically, very significant
And again, sorry, I'm pausing Ben so much already, but the thing about these Macron comments though, as well as all the Empire simps and China watchers are losing their fucking minds over it. So you can tell that that's how you know it's meaningful, right? These people are just like, it's like the Kill Bill sirens are going off for these like Empire simps and these China watchers,
A transition in Europe.
That's true, human person. It might be him trying to box her out.
We should not be premature here. Honestly, I do not think these comments are that significant. They're not really anything new. We have heard Macron made comments like this in the past.
I think it's significant given what's been going on the last year.
President in the U.S., Macron even called for Europe to create its own new European army to protect itself not only against China and Russia, but also against the United States itself.
Top Xi, that's right.
And what happened? Nothing. Nothing happened. Furthermore, Macron claimed that Europe was going to go around the illegal sanctions that the U.S. under Trump imposed on Iran. Europe supported the Iran nuclear deal, and Europe wanted to trade with Iran. And France played a key role in helping to develop a new payment system called Instex. And they developed it in 2019. And what happened? Once again, basically nothing. It did some minor transactions. And in early 2023, it was shut down. So yes, Macron, the French leader, is calling for strategic autonomy and independence for Europe from the US. However, rhetoric is one thing, actions are another. And today I'm going to talk about and analyze the actions of Europe, the geopolitics and economics of Europe, and the new Cold War that the US is waging on both China and Russia. And I'm going to argue that we should be skeptical of these comments made by Macron. They are a welcome development, but until he puts his money where his mouth is, it's a lot of empty rhetoric. As always, in my analyses here, in the description below, I have links to an article over at geopoliticaleconomy.com that has all of the sources that I'll be discussing today, so you can fact check it for yourself. Macron took a 3-day trip to Beijing this April, and this is a report in Xinhua, which is Chinese state media. And if you read it, it's very boilerplate. It clearly expresses that China does not have much confidence in Macron. There are a few notes I want to highlight in this a statement from Chinese state media Xinhua. It notes that President Xi of China noted the profound historic transformation taking place in the world. And he noted that they are firmly advocating for a multipolar world with greater democracy in international relations. And given France's role as a permanent member of the UN Security Council, it could potentially play a constructive role. So this is Xi hinting that Europe should be a new pole in a multipolar world. It should not simply be part of the US-led pole, the US-led hegemonic imperial order that it has been really for decades. Now, when Macron went to China, he was not alone. The top official in the European Union, the de facto EU leader, Ursula von der Leyen, she also went. And there's a very symbolic photo of Macron, von der Leyen, and Xi sitting in a room in this big circular table with a huge...
So much stuff just went all over my pants. Like, it's truly astonishing amount of like sauce and crumbs and various things. That was not cool.
Distance between them.
Very tasty,
this symbolically reflects the political distance between these leaders. Clearly, Xi did not expect to have very positive relations, especially with Ursula von der Leyen. Now, in response to the media coverage, we can see that apparently Xi and Macron had a much better meeting than Xi and von der Leyen. And that's not surprising because Ursula von der Leyen is a complete neoconservative, and she clearly believes that the future of Europe is with the United States in this transatlantic imperialist alliance. Macron, allegedly, according to his rhetoric, is more skeptical. But again, we need to look at the actual policies of France and not just the rhetoric of its leader. Now, the most interesting report on Macron's trip to China was an article published in Politico titled, "Europe Must Resist Pressure to Become America's Followers," says Macron. And while he was leaving China, Politico had an exclusive interview with Macron. And in this interview, Macron said that Europe must reduce its dependency on the United States and avoid getting dragged into a confrontation between China and the US over Taiwan. He called for Europe to have strategic autonomy and to become a third superpower. And he said that it would be a great risk if Europe, quote, gets caught up in crises that are not ours, which prevents it from building its strategic autonomy. So this is clearly the leader of France, one of the most powerful countries in the EU after Germany. It's probably the second most powerful. This is Macron saying that Europe needs to be independent of the US, and it is not in our interest to join the new Cold War on China. We should not join Washington in waging this new Cold War on Beijing. And the comments that Macron made in this interview that really angered Western politicians the most was when he spoke about
Empire
Taiwan.
Simps.
And he clearly said that the US sees Taiwan as this existential issue. It's not existential for us. We should not focus on it this much. And this is the exact quote from Macron. "The paradox would be that, overcome with panic, we believe we are just America's followers. The question Europeans need to answer is it in our interest to accelerate a crisis on Taiwan? No." He says clearly, no, we don't want a conflict over Taiwan. He says, quote, "The worst thing would be to think that we Europeans must become followers on this topic and take our cue from the US agenda and a Chinese overreaction." And while Macron was making these comments, the separatist leader of Taiwan, Tsai Ing-wen, was actually visiting the United States and also meeting with right-wing leaders.
No, absolutely
in
not
Central
human
America,
person.
The very few who
that's just the natural order of things. Canada being
in Taiwan, which internationally,
America's imperialist
international law,
lackeys,
is recognized as part of the People's Republic of China. Taiwan is a province of China. But anyway, so this Taiwanese separatist leader, Tsai, she actually went to the United States and she met with the Republican House Speaker, Kevin McCarthy, who is one of the most powerful officials in the U.S. government. So it's another example of U.S. support for separatism on Taiwan Island. Now, to be clear, we don't know exactly 100% what Macron said about Taiwan because actually the interview was censored. And Politico put an editor's note at the bottom of the article. And it notes that as is common in France and many other European countries, the French president's office insisted on checking and proofreading all the president's quotes to be published in the article as a condition of granting the interview. This violates Politico's editorial standards, but we agreed to the terms in order to speak with the French president. And the French president's office asked that some parts of the interview be cut. Specifically, they cut parts of the interview in which Macron spoke more frankly about Taiwan and Europe's strategic autonomy. This is pretty funny because the Western media loves to pretend that it's so free and independent. But here we have a Western regime censoring the media, which is exactly what they constantly accuse China and Russia and Iran of. And yet they're the ones willingly doing it. The French president gave them an interview and then said, actually, you need to cut what I said. I don't want you to report that, even though I did that in an interview with you. So the point is that what we know from this interview is only part of what Macron said, and it's clearly not exactly what he thinks. And I think we can read between the lines and conclude that Macron really doesn't care about Taiwan. It's the United States that is so concerned about Taiwan. One, because the U.S. wants to turn Taiwan basically into a de facto U.S. colony like it was from the 1950s until the 1970s. And the U.S. wants to build a military base on Taiwan again. And the U.S. wants to put nuclear weapons on Taiwan Island and aim them at mainland China like it had from the 1950s until the 1970s when Washington normalized relations with Beijing. I'll also add that Taiwan is the world's leading producer of semiconductor technology, and
this is the primary factor that's like causing this conflict, not like Taiwanese democracy or independence, as some people like to point it out. I just wanted to say chin chin to the chat as I drink my beverage here. The sandwich was very good. I didn't comment much on the sandwich, but it was very tremendous. I enjoyed it a lot.
And the U.S., not only U.S. companies, but the U.S. military needs access to that Taiwanese semiconductor technology. So that's what motivates the U.S. to support separatism in Taiwan.
Oh, yeah, Subutai sword. I mean, I know there was a lot of appetite for that. After World War II, they wanted to go finish the job, right? So thankfully, the real bloodthirsty imperialists didn't win out after World War II. And they did, but they didn't go all the way with it. Instead, pursuing these kind of proxy conflicts in Korea and Vietnam and all these other places, going into Latin America and all the coups and destabilization and sanctions regimes that they put in place. Like, it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. But I know there was a lot of appetite amongst a certain extremely bloodthirsty imperialist class in the U.S. that wanted to, after the war, continue the fight, go out and go after Russia and China and finish the job once and for all.
It's not about democracy or freedom or any of that propaganda nonsense. Now, getting back to this report from Politico.
Thank you, Ben.
The article notes that Ursula von der Leyen, the de facto leader of the EU, her meeting with Xi was not nearly as positive. It was not nearly as successful as
I imagine
Macron's
not.
was. And I think that's
I'm
clear.
sure it was really open to hearing her lectures.
Explain why, and it's because Macron, at least rhetorically, has been calling for Europe to be more independent. The article notes that Macron argued that Europe has increased its dependency on the US for weapons and energy and must now focus on boosting European defense industries. He also suggested Europe should reduce its dependence on the extraterritoriality of the US dollar. So that's an acknowledgement of the fact that the US dollar is extremely powerful and the US uses it as a geopolitical weapon, imposing sanctions on any country that carries out actions that Washington doesn't like. And Europe recognizes that it itself can be victimized by this aggressive US economic warfare strategy. And then once again, Macron called for Europe not to become vassals. The article notes that some leaders in Europe have joined much of the world in complaining about the weaponization of the dollar by the United States. And the article notes that some Western leaders have criticized France for allegedly not supporting Ukraine enough in the proxy war in Russia. I'll come back to that point later. I think the main point to take away is that France is definitely on board with the proxy war on Russia. It's not as anti-Russian as the US would like it to be. The main anti-Russian countries in Europe are Britain and Poland and the Baltic states, which are vehemently anti-Russian. Germany and France are anti-Russian, but they're not as anti-Russian as the US would want them to be. So Macron is certainly not going to be an ally of Moscow or Beijing, but I think it is fair to conclude that Europe sees Russia as a much bigger threat than it sees China. And a lot of this has to do with economics. The first point to stress here is that according to official data from Eurostat, this is EU official statistics.
It's weird how all those
in 2020,
economic
China
factors
was the
and trade and everything
origin
factors
for
into all
goods
this stuff.
Imported into the EU,
Kind of like
while
some
the
of
United
those
States was the largest
some of those
destination
economic
for goods exported by
opening up the economy
There's
to
a map showing
capital
EU
and
exports as of 2021.
creating this industrial base had
and
some
around
thought behind it.
400 billion euros of EU exports went to the United States, but about 224 billion euros of exports went to China. So that means that China is up there with
Maybe
the
some of
US
those
and
economic
Britain
decisions actually made a little
as
bit of sense.
Some of the top export partners for the European Union. However, in terms of imports, China is even more important. And that's why the European Union declared in 2020 that China took over the position as the EU's main trading partner in goods from the US. So the US had been the EU's top trading partner, and now China is the EU's top trading partner. China represents 16.2% of the total trade, and the US represents 14.7% of the total trade. There are two very useful graphs here from Eurostat that show the top export and import partners of the EU as of 2021. 22% of imports came from China compared to just 11% from the US. And 18% of EU exports went to the United States, 13% went to the UK, and 10% went to China. Another important detail here is that 8% of imports came from Russia. This was as of 2021. Obviously, the situation has changed a lot because of the proxy war in Ukraine and the escalation of the proxy war in Ukraine in February 2022 when Russia invaded, although that war actually began back in 2014, not in 2022. So clearly, as Europe tries to find new trading partners and diversify away from Russia, it cannot abandon China. It would be economic suicide for Europe. And that explains why Macron is taking this much more conciliatory tone toward China. It is a significantly more important trading partner for the EU than Russia is. Now, we should also keep in mind, of course, that inside the European Union, France has this...
It is funny to note all these factors and to understand then how difficult it is to decouple from China and how difficult it is to try and isolate them or sanction them or anything. And people still don't get what these economic decisions were about, what opening up the country to foreign capital was about, and what the Deng era was about, it becomes really clear in these conversations when it's like, I'm sure the U.S. would love to sanction them and economically isolate them and get all their kind of like vassal states like France and Germany on board with going against them. And they're all, lo and behold, they're all saying like, actually, not so much, not so fast there. You know, there's a reason for that. You know, there's this decision's actually made a lot of sense. And people still can't quite see, they can't like understand that. They can't like get a grip on like why these decisions were made in the first place. Or they'll be like, well, I'm a leftist and they made capitalist decisions, so it's capitalism and therefore it's bad. Which is a facile way of looking at it. You watching any NBA hoops action this evening? What's up, really chill guy? I guess I'm gonna watch the Raptors game. I don't know. It's the Raptors and Bulls play-in game. It's just been a depressing and disappointing season. I don't know. Probably if they beat the Bulls and look convincing doing it, I'll probably convince myself to be on board, but I'm both under the weather and tired. I'm sick right now. I'm both, yeah. So I don't know. If they win and look convincing, I'll probably be excited, but I don't know if this team is just, it seems like they've kind of given up. So I don't know. Press the communism button now. That's it. People just can't quite get a handle on this. If I were in charge of China, I simply would have smashed that communism button decades ago and just instantly created a stateless, classless society where all of the 1.4 billion people there had all their material needs met. Why don't they do that? It's so frustrating that they don't just do that. A real thing, which is an actual possibility. I, as like a Canadian or American leftist, would have easily done this. I don't know. I think it's a weird way of looking at all this stuff. So sad to see National Pentagon Radio leave Twitter. The freak out over Western politicians being labeled as state media and stuff, I think that's very funny and very telling. You know, they're so sensitive about this. These journalists, they take themselves so seriously. I could never be a propagandist. Not me. Everyone else is a propagandist except me. I would simply eliminate the time it takes to get to communism and make everyone happy. China must just have some sort of struggle kink. That's it. Yeah, that must be it. Ugh.
Second largest economy after Germany. The most recent available data shows that Germany has a nominal GDP of around $4 trillion, and France has a nominal GDP of about $2.8 trillion. So Germany makes up around 24% of the size of the entire EU economy, and France represents nearly 17%. Britain also has a large economy of around $3 trillion in GDP, which makes it a bit bigger than France and smaller than Germany. Of course, Britain left the European Union. And at the same time, we should keep in mind, I mean, the US GDP is around $25 trillion. So the US economy is still bigger than all of Europe combined. But it is important to see that some of the large economies in Europe, at least on paper, are publicly talking about having a more independent policy and much more skeptical of the US new Cold War against China. It's actually not just Macron, but also the Chancellor of Germany, Olaf Scholz. He visited Beijing in November, and then he wrote an article also in Politico. It shows how close Politico is to these Western leaders. And he wrote an op-ed for Politico in which Scholz said, we don't want to decouple from China.
Few people understand the suffering.
Can't be over-reliant. So basically, the message of his article was, unlike the U.S., we do not want to break with China. We can't just wage a new Cold War on China. This is a crazy idea. China is our most important trading partner. However, he said, we can't be too dependent on China. And actually, he made a very interesting comment, Olaf Scholz. He said that we are seeing the emergence of a multipolar world. And Scholz said that we must defend the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all states. No country is the backyard of another. That's also true for Asia, Africa, and Latin America. So that's clearly him criticizing the U.S. neo-colonialist policies toward Latin America. But again,
global Monroe
rhetoric
Doctrine
is one thing. Action is another. We've seen that Macron and Scholz have criticized the U.S. new Cold War on China. But when the rubber hits the road, they actually haven't significantly challenged that new Cold War. That's a point I'm going to come back to later. Now, it's very easy to explain why the leaders of Germany and France...
I think that's one of the interesting moments, though, is that I think in terms of like what the U.S. foreign policy is they're dictating to other countries, like, you can't sit on the fence, right? They're saying, like, no, you have to choose. You have to back us or you have to back them. There's no in between. So it's going to be interesting, I think, as things progress and as it gets more down to the wire, when the U.S. gets more serious about like enforcing that, which of these countries are just using this kind of rhetoric and which of them are actually serious about not wanting to be the U.S.'s lapdog anymore. You know, that's going to be really interesting to see. Yeah, it is the W doctrine. That's exactly it. It's you're with us or against us. I mean, that's the message that America is sending, around the world. So, and it's dutiful, like lapdogs like Canada and Australia are just unquestioningly accepting that. But you're seeing in Western Europe, like if France is the example, who have gotten screwed over by this relationship, especially just over the last year, who are starting to question it a bit more. So just very interested to see where that goes. And there is an alternative now. There wasn't always an alternative, which is, again, another reason that I think anyone, if you're on the left, should support this global shift and support, indeed, the PRC.
Are taking a much more conciliatory tone toward China than they have been against Russia. And it's because for them, China is one of their most important trading partners. And Russia, it has been an important trading partner, but they're finding alternatives to Russia. They cannot find alternatives to China. Also, China has the largest economy in the world according to purchasing power parity, which is a much better measurement than nominal GDP. But anyway, these are the figures from the Bank Santander looking at Germany's foreign trade. And you can see that its main trading partners in terms of exports, number one is the United States and number two is China. So about 9% of Germany's exports go to the US and about 8% go to China. That is to say that Germany exports more to China than it does even to France or the Netherlands or Poland or Italy or other parts of the European Union. And in terms of imports, China is the most important import partner of Germany. 12% of German imports come from China. In second place is the Netherlands, 7.5%. In third place is the US, 6%, followed by Poland, Italy, the other parts of the European Union. So for Germany, China is probably its most important trading partner, even more important than the US, especially for imports, which if you're trying to diversify your trade, you can often find other markets for your exports, but you might not be able to find replacements for those imports, at least at the same price level. They might be much more expensive. So
I think there's an interesting shift going on as well where, Ben with a better pause face. There we go. Where people think that it's going to be easy to just reshore the manufacturing industry. There's no problem. We'll just decouple from China. We'll create new jobs here. We'll bring all the jobs back, all the factories. Not nearly that easy. Like, not only do American capitalists not want to bring factories back to the United States where they have to pay significantly more for labor, as they currently do. That's why they moved to China in the first place and other places in the developing world, was so they didn't have to pay those high labor costs. But also, it's like when you have a manufacturing industry that's been like at it now for decades, it's like they have workers that are highly trained and specialized in developing these certain products that you can't just immediately build a factory somewhere and expect the same result in terms of the actual quality of what you're doing. Like the actual quality of the workers is like a big factor. That's why countries like, because there's, I think I was reading someone pointing out the other day that's like, in terms of labor costs, like there's other places that are cheaper than China at this point. There's other places to go. There's a reason that Apple, for instance, builds factories there, is because the workforce is highly trained and highly specialized. That's not something that you can just pick up and move to Indonesia or move to somewhere else or move back to the United States. There's now decades of these workers that have built this like massive amount of experience and specialization in building these products. So it's not as simple as just like, oh yeah, we're going to bring the jobs back. Oh yeah, we're going to just incentivize them to move somewhere else. You know, part of the reason that they're there, it's not just because of labor costs, but it's specifically because of what the workforce there can offer them in terms of the quality of what they're doing, which you can't just replicate that instantly somewhere else. Yeah, we'll just move these microprocessor foundries with massive expertise and startup costs across the Pacific. Just no problem. No problem. It's impossible to understand what the move of the French president here is without understanding that he's completely done on his national stage. Everyone hates him, so he tries to find a new credibility on the international stage. He already tried the same thing with his poor displayed attempt to negotiate with Putin a year ago. That is true as well. Like we were saying, he's a neoliberal. He's losing, the country's just in fucking chaos right now because of him forcing through undemocratically these neoliberal austerity reforms, raising the retirement age, etc., which is not something French workers are going to tolerate, nor should they. So part of it is, I think is part of it, just kind of trying to get some kind of credibility that he's lost elsewhere, and totally floundering. But I think just as an example of this general trend of the United States' waning influence, I still think it's a valuable thing to try and break down without really like trying. We don't need to stan Macron. We don't need to become Macron bros. Les hommes de Macron. I don't know what you would call that. We don't need to do that, but I think we can still talk about this as part of this general narrative, I think. Les Macronis. How does that serve Macron politically? I don't know if supporting China is a politically popular position, but I don't know if like being subservient to the US and sacrificing your own energy security and sacrificing your own economic stability because the US told you to, I don't think that's very popular either. So I think there's probably, on an international stage and maybe even domestically, there is an argument to be made for like moving away from that. Being economically independent and politically independent from the US. And like someone was pointing out earlier, could be a way to, cut off Le Pen, who might be more willing to make these kind of arguments as well. Being an EU stan is more popular than supporting China, at least in Western Europe. Well, I think that's the kind of what China is counting on, though, too, isn't it? Because they're saying specifically that in terms of this multilateralism, or this multipolarity, this shifting, global power struggle that we're kind of witnessing, they're saying, the EU should be one of those poles. It shouldn't just be subservient to the US. The EU should be a viable, like, independent entity as well, capable of making these kind of multilateral trade deals and other things, and having multilateral diplomatic ties. So there might be some appetite for that. Like China is literally trying to emphasize the EU's independence rather than the EU just being a institution that's just designed to like increase the United States' hegemonic grip on world power. Could it also just be a bit of realism poking through the neoliberal front, kind of a trial ballooner priming the population for the inevitable? Maybe. Like I said, I think you just give credit just for acknowledging that this like a shift is happening. And I agree. Like, I'm not trying to. We're not Macron bros. Seriously, Darty Colette. I'm not trying to like think that he's some political genius or anything like that. And I think, like Ben, I'm skeptical of the motivations for it, but I do think this story still is indicative of a larger sort of narrative about the declining influence of America, and the fact that it's even close allies are starting to kind of like even just rhetorically pull away. I think that's still somewhat significant. Yeah, and they see Germany in trouble. Like, the writing is on the wall. I think that's the kind of important thing. So you just wonder whether that inevitable future is being acknowledged, and just the fact that it's being acknowledged, I think, is interesting.
For those imports, at least at the same price level, they might be much more expensive. So China is extremely important for Germany. And that explains why, while the US is pressuring Germany to decouple economically from China, it simply can't do so. In France, the situation is similar, although not quite as close to China. If you look at France's main trading partners, China is among them. It's one of the top partners, although it's not nearly as important as other countries. So, for instance, 14% of French exports go to Germany, making Germany by far the most important market for France. And 17% of imports come from Germany, making it by far the most
so
important.
let's just check out Ben's analysis of this. I know Ben is very skeptical of it as well.
China is also important.
I'm interested to see where he comes down on that. 5%
of France's exports go to China compared to 7% to the US. And 7% of France's imports come from China compared to 4% from the US. So France imports more from China than it imports from the United States. So those economic factors explain why Europe is very hesitant and is trying not to accelerate this new Cold War drive against China, while it is actually waging war on Russia. As Germany's foreign minister Annalena Baerbock said, we are at war with Russia.
We are fighting a war against Russia. We can fight this war only together.
A clear example of the difference between rhetoric and action is the decision by the government of the Netherlands, which is also a member of the EU, to ban the export of advanced microchip technology to China. This is following obediently along with the US technological war on China. The US government banned the export of advanced technologies, including superconductors, microchips, and quantum computer parts. And the website My Europe revealed that the Dutch curb on microchip tech exports for China could become EU-wide. I'm reading here from this website. This is in March, a month ago.
I'm sorry, Ben, but this MF said microchip. The Dutch
government to restrict export of advanced microchip technology to China may be expanded to a European-wide scope, says Valdis Dombrovskis, the European Commission Vice President in charge of trade relations. The way export controls function in the EU, it's a national decision, but there is a possibility also to bring this decision to the EU level. The Dutch authorities have indicated that they have interest, and they said they're going to be discussing this with other member states of the EU. So this raises the question: France, as a member of the EU,
you can count on me.
Is it going to
good old Rob to talk you through all this?
It's funny with the video placement and the alert box placement, how sometimes it looks like my head has replaced the head of the person that we're looking at. Moss, thank you for the gifted sub. I really appreciate that, Moss. Thank you. Hey, no power at work, got sent home for a couple hours. That's wonderful. I love it. We love to hear it. Nothing better than the unexpected early finish. You gotta love that. I remember this one time, like I was working as a busboy at a restaurant here in Montreal. Excuse me. I was working as a busboy here in Montreal, kind of in the height of my sort of like early 20s hipster lifestyle, and had been up very late the previous night drinking and doing other stuff, you know, not naming any particular substances, but had very little sleep. And I went into work and I just felt like I was dying. I was just like, I just wanted to die. I had an 8-hour shift, a busboy shift. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this. And I was just so miserable. And my boss, Danny, was just like, are you okay? You feel okay? And I'm like, no. I was like, no, I don't feel good. He's like, just go home. And I was just like, I've never been so happy. Oh my God, I've never been so happy. I left after about an hour and I just went home to, it was a big W for Danny. It was. I miss that guy. This was the restaurant, if you're ever in Montreal, Chu Chai, really good restaurant. It's a vegan Thai restaurant. And as you know, I'm not vegan, but some of the very best food in the entire city. I think it's still open. I was so happy. Oh my God, I was so happy that I got to go home and just like smoke weed and play video games. One of the best feelings. Anyway, let's continue.
Challenge these sanctions on China. Is it going to join other member states of the EU, like the Netherlands, in waging this tech war and trade war and economic war against China? And by extension,
blue collar, Rob, that's right. I so could not do that job anymore. Oh my God, just the idea of being on my feet every night for all that time, it makes my body hurt just like thinking about it.
EU joins. Is France going to go along with the rest of the EU, or is it going to go independent? And can the EU even resist pressure by the US not to join in this economic war against China? What if the US threatens sanctions against Europe? What if the US threatens sanctions against France? Will France actually grow a spine and say that we are an independent sovereign country and we will not tolerate the US telling us who we can do trade with?
This is what I was asking earlier. Like when the chips are down and the US says like there's no more no more sitting on the fence. That's when I'm going to be very interested to see the reaction of these kind of Western allies like France or whoever else, Germany or whoever else. That's going to be a very interesting moment. And I think it's fast approaching the more that the Taiwan thing escalates.
Thus far, Macron's words have only been rhetorical. He has not actually challenged the sanctions and the U.S. economic policies of war aimed toward China. And until he does
just gonna
so,
be the Reddit
we
belt.
should be very skeptical.
It's going to be pathetic. I hope people realize like when World War III breaks out and the Reddit belt is our only allies in that, I hope they will realize finally that like we're actually the bad guys. We're on the wrong side of that. Maybe these people can finally wrap their minds around that then.
Of what he says and look at what he actually does. Another clear example of Europe's rhetoric not matching its actions can be seen in the brief attempt to try to circumvent illegal US sanctions on Iran. And this was reported on by the website, the Bourse and Bazaar Foundation. And the article is titled, Iran Trade Mechanism Instex is Shutting Down. It explains how in 2019, Britain, France, and Germany created the Instrument in Support.
I'm so sorry. These aborted sneezes are just going to kill me. Oh my God. It's so unpleasant.
Of trade exchanges called the Instex. And this was created, it was a state-owned company created in response to the Donald Trump administration withdrawing from the Iran nuclear deal in May 2018 and reimposing sanctions on Iran illegally in violation of international law. And European companies wanted to continue doing trade with Iran. So in August 2018, representatives of the EU, France, Germany, and Britain issued a joint statement in which they called to preserve, quote, effective financial channels with Iran and the continuation of Iran's export of oil and gas. So this was the EU and Britain publicly claiming they were going to challenge the illegal US sanctions on Iran and continue trading with Iran using Instex. However, it didn't go anywhere. It was a failure. And why? This article explains it. Quote, many European technocrats were reluctant to support a project which had the overt aim of blunting US sanctions power, even at a time when figures like the French finance minister Bruno Le Maire and Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte were making bold statements.
The U.S. has more than enough nukes to annihilate the world multiple times over. Unless BRICS is a plan to seize them, the entire world is fucked come World War III. And that's exactly why I hope that outcome can be avoided. Even though sometimes I'm a little cynical about whether that's possible. I don't doubt, though, that the U.S. would rather nuke the whole world than actually give up their hegemonic power in any meaningful way. So hopefully there's a way around that doesn't involve total fucking annihilation, but we're going to see. Oh. If Macron starts actually doing something about China, there's a very high chance he sticks to it, his main characteristic being that no matter what happens, he's never wrong. It's very politician-like in that sense. Never has been, never will. The man's always right, never admits a mistake. I guess there's hope in that. Depends on the first actions. Tartir Kaklet, are you French? But I think that's a pretty good analysis of it. Again, we're trying to, I think, acknowledge this story without becoming Macron bros. I am indeed. Okay, that's cool. That's cool. Bonjour. I actually do speak French, but don't want to get into that, though. Anyway.
About the need for European economic sovereignty. Then in May 2019, when the Trump administration canceled a set of sanctions waivers, European purchases of Iranian oil ended. So this rhetoric we've heard about European sovereignty is not new. We've heard it for years. And this is another example of where when the US threatened Europe stopped trading with Iran. This article notes that many considered the Instex project doomed even before the first transaction was completed. Most of the blame for Instex failure must lie with the Europeans. European officials promised a historic project to assert their economic sovereignty, but they never really committed to that undertaking. So here we have a clear example of France and also Germany and Britain and even EU leaders claiming they were going to maintain more independence from the US. And here we are in 2023. The EU is even more dependent and subordinated to the US than it.
I don't think we should be projecting the desire to use nukes on China and Russia when the only country to use them is the United States. But I don't think we're doing that, are we? I think we're saying, actually, on the contrary, we're saying that like the US is the one in that scenario is the country that's the most likely to destroy the entire world rather than give up their sort of iron-fisted grip on the global economy, and their unipolar imperialist dominance. Mearsheimer thinks if Russia felt its territory was threatened, it would use nukes. Yeah, I mean, I know there's a lot of speculation about that. Maybe if things really did start to go a lot worse. I believe it was in response to a comment. Oh, okay, I see. Yeah, I know there's been comments about that. If it was actually going to get worse, maybe that would be some kind of like a last resort, but who knows? I feel like with the U.S. trending more to fascism, there's a real chance of countries turning towards China and America being a stubborn hermit and refusing to work with anyone who's working with the new world power. I think so, yeah, and we're seeing that take place right now. It's like countries need infrastructure, especially developing countries. They need infrastructure. And they know by now, or they should know, that this U.S. style of development, based around the IMF and the World Bank and all this shit, is not a way to actually develop your country, develop the infrastructure. But there's actually an option now to do that, which didn't exist before. Jesus Christ. I hope you folks appreciate that I'm here doing this show looking like this. Look at this. Look at this. I'm a mess.
It was back then. And that was when Donald Trump was president. Now, with the proxy war,
I gotta get more
Ukraine,
Kleenex.
Europe and the U.S. are joined at the hip.
A hot mess, more like it, Demi Dorco.
China is a much more important trading partner for France and the rest of Europe than Iran is. Iran is a major exporter of oil and gas, but Europe can find new sources of oil and gas. They cannot replace their trading partnership with China, including China's massive market with 1.4 billion people and China being the factory of the world. So there is that factor, to be fair. But again, I'm repeating myself a lot here, but Macron may say that he wants sovereignty. I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that he actually believes that. But when it comes to the actual reality of the political and economic questions, like will France challenge the rest of the European Union if they don't go along with it? Will France challenge illegal US sanctions on China like it failed to do on Iran? And if France is not willing to stand up to the US tangibly, yet alone to the rest of the European Union, which it's a member of, which limits its own room of operation, then this is empty rhetoric from Macron. Now, we should keep in mind that Macron also has an invested interest in trying to distract from his domestic problems at home inside France, where he is extremely unpopular. Macron is himself a millionaire and a former banker, and he has implemented a lot of right-wing neoliberal economic policies. And right now, Macron actually has some of the lowest approval ratings that he's had since he first entered office as president in 2017. According to the polling firm Morning Consult, as of March 21st, only 23% of people in France support Macron, and disapproval is 72%. That is less than 1/3 of French people support Macron, and nearly 3/4 oppose him. And
Tarty Raclette, if you're still in the chat, I'd be interested to know. I know we've checked in on this in the past, but what Mélenchon is saying about Ukraine and the relationship with America and China and the new Cold War and all this stuff. Because obviously, as someone has more actual left-wing credentials, he's going to have a more coherent sort of foreign policy view that's not just reactive to what's going on. Has he been good on this?
And his highest approval rating was 42%, and that was in this new phase of the war in Ukraine when Russia invaded in February. And that was when he was most popular. So he's never been higher than 42%. And he's been consistently in the 20 percentile range or low 30s. So, I mean, he's deeply unpopular. And right now in France, there are huge protests going on against Macron's neoliberal economic policy. Specifically, he's been trying to raise the retirement age, and he was forcing it through without a vote by the...
Mélenchon is still seen as an Assad and Putin supporter because he was not fully on board with the proxy wars and criticized it. Common Mélenchon W.
By the National Assembly, just imposing this executive order raising the retirement age. There's this hilarious video that went viral on social media showing people in Paris at a cafe just, eating normally and sitting around while protesters set off huge fires. I mean, the French do not mess around when it comes to protests. And The French labor movement and labor unions are still very strong and have been resisting these right-wing economic policies imposed by Macron, while corporations...
Even the French left largely supports funding and supplying Ukraine, so it's not that good for him. You hate to see it. I mean, you could say that about every Western country. It seems like that's where most of the left has been like, oh yeah, we're against NATO. We have these leftist views, but of course we need to back them this time. Of course we need to back them this time. It was the same thing. Again, it's not even Ukraine. It was the same thing in Syria. Well, we're anti-imperialist, but we got to support NATO this time. Really frustrating. And they're going to do the same thing in Taiwan. They're going to do the same thing. Of course I'm on the left, but we got to support Taiwanese sovereignty and democracy and back America on this one yet again, unfortunately, reluctantly. I wish some of these folks would maybe wise up to some of this stuff, and realize that it seems like time and time again, even though I claim to be against, American imperialism and militarism, it certainly seems like in every time that it matters, I'm vehemently defending their position and smearing anyone that's against that as being like an Assadist or Putin supporter or a President Xi supporter, as they're going to do, all these same people are going to do in this upcoming Taiwan conflict. It'd be interesting if some of these people maybe ask themselves some critical questions about why it is that every single time that it comes up, they end up reluctantly shucksing their way into supporting NATO, supporting American imperialism, supporting Western hegemony. Time and time again, the same people just fall for the same thing. It's kind of frustrating, isn't it? Lately, Mélenchon went more silent on international issues because it always comes back to Ukraine, except when he's been interviewed about that in the last 2 months. And he's advocated for diplomacy and reaching a ceasefire. And it did not go well for Mélenchon's approval on that matter, even from his own party. And that's the amazing thing, where even people on the left in France and Canada and America and elsewhere, just advocating for diplomacy and a ceasefire, that's like supporting Putin. That's supporting Putin. Not wanting to arm proxies to fight Russia, that's supporting Putin. Wanting to have some kind of ceasefire or settled negotiation, supporting Putin. Simultaneously, though, supporting all those things doesn't mean, or not supporting them, doesn't mean supporting NATO. To these people. I don't know, it's weird. It's weird to me. Yeah, that is good enough to answer my question. Thank you. Is there some common bias that prevents them from seeing non-white countries as having agency or having any justification for their actions? Yeah, I think propaganda and peer pressure is a good example of why that happens. All of a sudden it's like you can't support this position of not supporting NATO or wanting to arm these proxies, whether it's in Ukraine or Syria or Taiwan. And all of a sudden people saying you support dictators, you support violence, you support genocide. It really freaks people out. It really freaks people out. Hello, fellow Empire Underminers. Hello, Red Wizard. What's up? French left is completely aligned with the U.S. foreign policy. Ukraine, Uyghur, anything you'd think of. Otherwise, you're a Stalinist, and that's it, even from the revolutionary left. It seems to be, it's the revolutionary left Western mind virus. It seems to be pervasive. It's inoperable. Empire simping coming from the revolutionary left in Canada and the US and France and all across the rules-based international order. It's endemic in the NATO sphere, that's right. You really do hate to see it. You really do. And you know what? As much as it makes people uncomfortable, that's why I think it's still important to stake out these positions. That's why I think it's important to even develop a more critical and nuanced understanding of Stalin, because I think the way that Stalinism has been used to paint people with this brush and has made people so confused, and it causes people to hold these completely incoherent political views. President Xi, please liberate my people. Absolutely. First time chat from Pinch Snipers. You're going to fit right in this community. You're going to fit right in. We're proud top Xi supporters over here. Yes, eat your leftist ass. It's up to the... I love this, always repeating that name. It's up to the point that as I'm learning more and more about past and present socialist countries on this channel, it makes me question a lot of things. Are they all that wrong, or am I the one going on a dark path when I start to see USSR or China or Cuba as good? No, you're on the right path. Tartsi Rekla, you're on the right path. The good path. The golden path. History will absolve us, okay? I know it's not always easy. I know it's politically isolating and alienating to hold these positions sometimes, okay? I feel it too. It's very alienating. History will absolve us. Hold the line. Hold the line. Harden your heart. You're on the right side of history.
These right-wing economic policies imposed by Macron, while corporations and the rich in France keep getting richer and are making record profits, while poor and working people in France their real wages are declining and inflation is skyrocketing and their standard of living is declining as things become more and more expensive. So it's class war that's going on in France. So clearly
we get to
Macron
be smug
does
in our
have
rightness
an interest in distracting.
in the 5 minutes before the nukes take us out. Listen, we have to hold on to something, okay? If you're holding these, it's 2023 and you live in the West and you hold these views, you're used to losing a lot. So yeah, we can be smug. We can be smug for the 5 minutes before the annihilation happens. We've earned it. We've earned it. I believe in us not dying as well. I believe in that as well. I think we're going to be okay. I hope.
From that. In fact, recent data shows that right now the profit share of corporations in the Eurozone is at the highest stage, the highest level in a decade. It represents 42%. And meanwhile, while corporations across the EU are making record profits, real wages are declining. They're falling sharply across the Eurozone. So once again, this is class war. Wages of workers in France, in Germany, in Spain, and Italy are declining while corporate profits are rising. And Macron, as a millionaire banker, right-wing politician, he is just instead trying to distract attention from that with some of this rhetoric, which sounds nice, but at the end of the day, is he
Never tell me
actually
the
going
odds.
to live up to that rhetoric? And again, I think we should be skeptical. In terms of other politicians in Europe, there is definitely not a consensus on this, far from it. In fact, after Politico published that interview with Macron, in which he called for Europe to be more independent of the US, we saw that many politicians in Europe have been criticizing Macron. Politico published an article titled, "China Hawks Tell Macron, You Don't Speak for Europe." It quoted a group of China skeptic lawmakers, so anti-China hawks, from around the world who are part of an anti-China group called the IPAC, the Inter-Parliamentary Alliance on China. And they said it should be emphasized that Macron's words are severely out of step with the feeling across Europe's legislatures.
Across Europe's legislatures and beyond. That's an interesting turn of phrase. Across the legislatures and beyond. What about the actual people, though? Well, they don't matter.
And beyond. And they were especially angry about Macron's comments about Taiwan, saying that this is not a priority for us. This is something that the US is concerned about, but not us. We don't want a conflict over Taiwan. The Guardian, which is the newspaper of the British ruling class, they published a very similar report titled "Macron Sparks Anger by Saying Europe Should Not Be Vassal in US-China clash. And they mentioned a tweet from the neoconservative US Senator Marco Rubio, a Republican from Florida, in which he condemned Macron for meeting with Xi and for calling for independence from Washington. I'm not going to play the video. Marco Rubio is not worth any time listening to. This guy is a complete war criminal and warmonger. The Guardian summed it up saying that if Macron speaks for all of
the West has revolutionary potential, but the mass of people enjoys a relatively cushy life thanks to class collaboration and the spoils of imperialism. Going back to Engels' report on the conditions of the British working class, the threads of neocolonial exploitation must be cut. And I think that's going to be the interesting thing, Carnot, as material conditions continue to decline, and as these contradictions become more and more apparent, will more and more people start to change their viewpoint on it? The treat access is obviously a big thing for a lot of people. Once that pipeline gets shut off, we're going to see whether it has a profound impact on people's viewpoints.
Of Europe, then maybe the U.S. should consider focusing its foreign policy on containing China and leave Europe to handle the war in Ukraine. So basically saying the U.S. is telling Europe, if you don't join us in the new Cold War on China, we're not going to help you wage the new Cold War on Russia. And the Wall Street Journal, which represents a faction of the Republican Party,
that was very
largely,
good. Yeah,
it was one of the only newspapers
the
in the
Marco
US
Rubio
that was
comment was very
pro-Trump.
good.
And their editorial board said that Macron's comments were unhelpful, and they said they undermine U.S. and Japanese attempts to weaken China in the Western Pacific, while encouraging U.S. politicians who want to reduce American commitments in Europe. They also quoted members of the European Parliament who criticized Macron and said he can't speak on behalf of Europe. And they quoted other people from Germany and other countries who were criticizing Macron. The most important contradiction that this exposes is the difference between France and Germany on one side.
I like that Macron doesn't speak for Europe. That privilege belongs to someone named Ursula von der Leyen. Exactly. No sinister connotations there whatsoever.
And Eastern Europe. We've seen that Eastern Europe is extremely pro-US and against not only Russia, but also against China. And Politico
which has been
acknowledged
carefully
in
cultivated.
Another report that was titled, Europe's Eastern Half Claps Back at Macron. We need the US. Politico wrote, stop driving Europe away from the United States, dismayed Central and Eastern European officials. They fumed in response to Macron's comments. And they said the comments rattled those near the EU's eastern edge who have historically favored closer ties with the Americans and pushed for a harsher approach to Beijing. And they quoted the far-right Prime Minister of Poland, Mateusz Morawiecki, who said, quote, instead of building strategic autonomy from the United States, I propose a strategic partnership with the United States. And by the way, it's not a coincidence that Poland's far-right prime minister is actually traveling to the United States this April 11th to meet with President Joe Biden and the State Department and the Pentagon to deepen their ties. And while leaving the capital, Warsaw, Morawiecki said that U.S.-Polish relations, quote, have not been so good for a long time, and perhaps they have never been so strong. This is deeply ironic because even Obama has admitted that Poland is, quote, essentially authoritarian. Poland, which is a member of the EU and NATO, has a far-right authoritarian regime. In fact, Foreign Policy magazine, which is the mouthpiece of the U.S. ruling class in Washington, they also admitted back in 2017 that Poland's Prime Minister, Morawiecki, is a far-right populist, they said. They noted that he is a millionaire ex-banker and his government has, quote, encouraged xenophobic nationalism and trampled on democratic institutions. So this is obviously very hypocritical. I talked about this blatant hypocrisy in a separate episode and a report that you can find over at geopoliticaleconomy.com. I'll link to it in the description below. I was discussing the so-called Summit for Democracy that the U.S. State Department held this March, in which Poland's far-right government was invited, including the far-right president of Poland, Andrzej Duda. And the reality is that the U.S. knows that Poland has a far-right authoritarian regime, but because Poland is anti-Russian and anti-China, the U.S. considers it an important ally, and Washington doesn't care that Poland is governed by a far-right reactionary authoritarian regime because they don't care about democracy. They care about imperial hegemony and maintaining their hegemony over the world.
And remember, it was the Polish MEP, Anne Applebaum's husband. Anne Applebaum has been a central figure in building this kind of narrative about Ukrainian nationalism and the Soviet Union in Ukraine and creating this whole narrative. And her husband, the Polish MEP, when the Nord Stream pipeline was sabotaged, tweeted openly, "Thank you, America. Thank you, USA." Really spelling it out for everyone.
So the point to take away from this is that just because Macron made those comments doesn't actually mean that European policy is going to shift significantly or really at all. I want to stress again that back in 2018, Macron actually called for Europe to create a European army to defend against the US. And this very much angered Donald Trump back when he was president. This was reported on in Politico in 2018. It noted that Macron called for Europe to build a, quote, real European army to protect itself from Russia, China, and the US. Trump attacked Macron and said this is very insulting. Macron said in an interview, quote, "When I see President Trump announcing that he's quitting a major disarmament treaty with Russia, which was formed after the 1980s Euro missile crisis that hit Europe, who is the main victim? Europe and its security. We have to protect ourselves with respect to China, Russia, and even the United States of America. We need a Europe which defends itself better alone without just depending on the United States in a more sovereign manner." And after Macron said that, the former German Chancellor Angela Merkel said the same thing. She called for a real, true European army. This is a report in The Guardian noting back in November 2018, Angela Merkel has said EU leaders should one day consider a real, true European army, shortly after Donald Trump ramped up a Twitter attack on Emmanuel Macron over the same idea. Speaking to the European Parliament in Strasbourg, the German Chancellor backed the bold step in European defense policy, saying, quote, "We have to look at the vision of one day creating a real, true European army." So that's the rhetoric, but where is the army? Here we are, 4.5 years later, and there's not a single development. In fact, it's the exact opposite. The proxy war in Ukraine has made Europe even more dependent on the United States than ever, even more subservient to the United States. So what this reflects
True
is that
European army needed, says Chancellor of Germany.
Irreconcilable contradiction here. If France and Germany want to be more independent of the United States, they have to do so as countries and not as the European Union. Because as we've seen, multiple countries in the EU, especially in Eastern Europe, do not want to break with the US. They're basically US proxy regimes and client states, and they want to join the US in the new Cold War, not only in Russia, but also against China. So if France and Germany want to truly be independent, they have to break with the EU. So that means that Macron is put in a situation. What is more important to him? His own country's sovereignty and independent foreign policy, or the European Union? Because he can't have both. It's very clear from that. It's clear in Germany as well. They can't have both. And again, what we've seen is that despite some leaders, at least rhetorically claiming they want more independence, like Macron, at the end of the day, when the rubber hits the road, they always end up siding with the US because of the disciplining apparatus of the European Union itself. France does not control the EU. The EU is really controlled by a bunch of unelected, neoconservative, right-wing bureaucrats like Ursula von der Leyen, who are...
So in other words, Russia fear-mongered their population with the threat of a defensive European army, but since it didn't happen, They had to pretend that assistance to Ukraine after their invasion is said assistance. I don't think that's accurate though, because the assistance to Ukraine didn't begin in February of 2022. It began in like 2014 or 2015. They've been pumping billions of dollars of arms into Ukraine for the last decade. The CIA has been training these neo-Nazi militias there for the last decade. There's been plenty of reporting on this. This is not like a new phenomenon. And in fact, that's Russia's entire justification for going through with the invasion in the first place. No, Sanvatsu, that's not what happened. That's not what happened. I'm sorry. That's not accurate. Happened after 2014 and Russia invaded Crimea. You're messing up the timeline a little bit on that one. Because it goes also back to the Euromaidan, which the US was deeply implicated in, and installing a pro-EU, pro-Western government in Ukraine. That's the thing with this idea. Like, if you take this like empire supporting position, everything that we do is defensive, right? Oh, we're just defensively arming Ukraine. Oh, we just, out of the goodness of our hearts, you see. Like, do you know how ridiculous this sounds? Seriously. Just when you actually say it out loud, really think about what you're advocating for. Oh, just out of the goodness of our hearts, the poor defenseless Ukrainians, we just needed to defend them from the big mean bully Russia. And we're just pouring all these arms into Ukraine just because we're so nice and we care about their democracy and their sovereignty. That's why we had to arm and train these neo-Nazi militias, because we're so passionate about defending democracy from these mean aggressors. Like, really? Do you really think that? Do you really think that? Russia's the imperialist here. The fact that you're siding with these imperialists is hilarious. No, I'm not even siding with anyone. I'm simply acknowledging that NATO and the Western countries helped provoke the conflict. You know, I'm anti-war. I'm against the war. I don't think it should have happened in the first place. I think that they should have a ceasefire and stop doing the war now. But what you're doing is supporting NATO, though, and by extension, U.S. imperialism. You know, there's one major imperialist power in the world. It's not Russia. It's not Russia or China. There's only one country that has that kind of grip over the global financial system or the global flow of information. There's only one country that has the 800 military bases around the world. That's the United States of America. That's what you're supporting. That's what you're coming on here to support. That's unfortunate to me. Oh boy, NATO is literally the ultimate form of anti-imperialism and anti-warfare. Okay, Sanvatsu. That sounds good. You know what? I think you just fucking convinced me. Thank you. That's great. Oh. That's great stuff. Oh, Jesus. Okay.
Are deeply committed to the transatlantic imperialist alliance with the United States that is aimed at maintaining Western unipolar hegemony and preventing any other powers from challenging Western neocolonial dominance of the world. It really is that simple.
Just instead of doing this like mental gymnastics that you're doing, just say that you support imperialism. Just say that you're a Western chauvinist and you think America is the good guys of the world and you support that. I mean, I don't agree. Couldn't be me personally, but don't couch it in this like, oh, it's anti-imperialist. Like, come on, just own up to it. Just say that you're you love the empire and you want it to continue. And you think America is the global good guys that defend democracy and freedom and that stuff. Just say that. Don't say, oh, it's NATO, the anti-imperialist alliance. Like, you just sound silly. You just sound ridiculous. Sanmatsu, are you a teenager? I'm not spending my time arguing with a teenager on here. That's just too much for me. Come on. Let's get real here. Don't support NATO. It's really easy to not support NATO. Okay? And you're in here, unfortunately, spewing pro-NATO propaganda. Just all the pro-NATO talking points. Pretty sad state of affairs. And I'm gonna take the lack of answer about the age to admit that you are a teenager.
A clear example of France failing to follow through with its commitments like this is the Minsk Accord that was negotiated in 2015 to try to end the war in Ukraine. And this was negotiated by Macron's predecessor, François Hollande, and the former German Chancellor,
Is this your homework, Larry?
With the previous president of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko. This was after 2014 when the U.S. organized a coup in Ukraine that overthrew its democratically elected, geopolitically neutral government and installed a pro-Western regime led by the
You're killing your father,
Petro
Sambatsu.
Poroshenko. And in this negotiation in 2015, there was Minsk 1 in 2014, which failed, and then Minsk 2 in 2015, and they came to an agreement. And Ukraine agreed to decentralize the authority of the state and provide autonomy for Donbass, for Donetsk and Lugansk, and Ukraine failed to do so. And it wasn't just Ukraine that failed to live up to its commitments in this agreement. France and Germany, which were guarantors, which oversaw the negotiations, also failed to pressure Ukraine to abide by Minsk II, and we now know why. In fact, this April, there was a video published from two Russian
Some incoherent political views there coming from
Vivon and
Sambatsu's
Lexus,
following
and
list.
they tricked France's former president, François Hollande, into thinking that they were Petro Poroshenko, the former president of Ukraine, and they held a call with him, a video call, and in this call, Hollande admitted, quote, "There was the idea that it was Putin who had wanted to buy time, but it was us, France and Germany, who wanted to buy time to allow Ukraine to recover, to strengthen its resources. That's why we have to defend the Minsk negotiations, in which Poroshenko played a very positive role. It was precisely during these 7 years that there were ways for Ukraine to strengthen itself, and this is where Putin was wrong. He underestimated the capacity of the Ukrainians and their resistance." So this is him acknowledging that France and Germany used the Minsk Accords to buy time, to give
Merkel
Ukraine
also
time
admitted this.
to militarize, to prepare for war with Russia.
Yeah,
now, after
absolutely. Merkel said the same
video
thing.
Came out,
No
Hollande
intention.
claimed
No intention of ever following through with these things. That's why I get frustrated. People say, "Oh, you support Putin, you support the invasion." It's like there was so many opportunities to not have this war. I mean, there was a peace deal on the table. All they had to do was just follow what was on the table, and NATO said, "No, you won't be doing that. You'll be doing no such thing. We're going to continue pumping arms into this conflict." You know, that's why it gets frustrating. It's like none of this shit had to happen. But they're a defensive alliance. That's right. Yeah. Like, just give me a fucking break.
that he didn't mean to say that, and he claimed that he was tricked by these Russian pranksters or whatever. But this is not the first time he has made those comments. The former French president made very similar comments back in December in an interview with the Kiev Independent, which is a Western government-funded anti-Russia media outlet. And in this interview, the Kiev Independent asked Hollande, the former French president,
"Hello, I'm NATO, and I'm here to say we're going to bomb Libya in a defensive way."
About an interview that the German Chancellor Angela Merkel did with Die Zeit, the German newspaper, in which she said that the Minsk II protocols, that in terms of the Minsk II protocols, quote, "It was obvious that the conflict was going to be frozen, that the problem was not solved, but it gave Ukraine precious time." And then they asked Hollande if he agreed, and he said, "Yes, Angela Merkel is right on this point." He said, "Since 2014, Ukraine has strengthened its military posture. Indeed, the Ukrainian army was completely different from that of 2014. It was better trained and equipped. It is the merit of the Minsk agreements to have given the Ukrainian army this opportunity." So this is a clear example of Europe claiming that it was going to do something that angered the US, which is support peace between Ukraine and Russia. But in reality, Europe was simply acting as basically an accomplice of Washington and tricking Moscow into thinking that Kiev was going to abide by this agreement that Paris and Berlin helped to negotiate, but were never really serious about implementing. Ukraine's current Western-backed leader, Zelensky, has also basically admitted the same, that the Minsk Accords were about giving Ukraine time to prepare for war with Russia, of course backed by NATO. I have a separate report about that, which I will also link to in the description below. So with that, I'm going to conclude here. I think I hit every important angle. This was a much longer episode than I had anticipated. But the main point I want you all to take away is that France, Macron, even German leaders have been saying for years now that they want Europe to be more independent of the US. But rhetoric and action are not the same thing. And if we look again and again and again, we can see that France says one thing and does another. Macron is caught in a difficult situation. I'll give him credit. I have no sympathy for this man. He's reprehensible, but he is in a difficult situation because if he does see himself as this Charles de Gaulle figure and he wants to go back to this legacy of French nationalism, like, for instance, the former French president Charles de Gaulle, he did withdraw France partially from NATO, from part of the military command of NATO. If Macron does see himself as a de Gaulle-like figure, he's going to have to challenge the European Union, not only the US. But France is in this impossible position. If it truly is serious about strategic autonomy, the entire EU has to change. And there is no political will for the rest of the EU to change. But he's also in a difficult situation because France cannot give up its important trading relationship with China. China is one of its most important trading partners. It would be economic suicide, and yet the US is pressuring it to do so. So, at the end of the day, it is Washington pressuring Europe to commit economic suicide on its behalf. And in his comments, Macron acknowledged that. Macron said that the Inflation Reduction Act passed in the United States is doing serious economic damage to Europe. So
how's the old inflation? It doesn't seem like it's reduced all that much.
Many of its companies are moving across the Atlantic to the United States. Several European economies are potentially on the verge of a recession. And meanwhile, there's not really much that these leaders can do because of the structure of the European Union, which is deeply undemocratic. It's thoroughly neoliberal, and in terms of its economic policy, it's deeply right-wing and pro-corporate and pro-big bank. And when in terms of foreign policy, it is completely subordinated to the United States and to NATO. So with that, I'm not going to repeat myself anymore. This is already long enough. I want to thank everyone for joining me. This is Geopolitical Economy Report.
Thank you, Ben. Here's the link to the video. Please support Geopolitical Economy Report. Ben is a friend of the stream. He's been on as a guest before. I appreciate the work that he does. Please make sure you subscribe to Ben's YouTube and support his channel. That was great stuff. And yeah, just to go back to what you're saying there, Old Dutch, you say, see, the closest I get to supporting Putin is acknowledging that it didn't have to happen, only if the West and NATO were willing to accept Russia's security concerns. But of course, that was never a possibility because we're talking about the US. I think almost any rational leader would take steps to defend their red line, especially a large country with the giant military. I mean, you don't have to become like a big Russian chauvinist or pretend that Russia's like not a like capitalist country. To just acknowledge this basic reality that they had a red line, and they very clearly indicated what that red line was and said, stop trying to cross this red line. And what did we do? For an entire decade, continued going right up and pushing right up against that red line and daring them to respond for like just the last decade, but for multiple decades. That's what our leaders have done in the West. So you don't have to support Putin or support Russia to just acknowledge that, like, we've been pushing up against this hard limit that they have for now years and years and years. And they've been very clear about, like, if you continue this, there's going to be a response. And we pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. And lo and behold, there's a response. And then we throw up our hands and say, oh my God, look at this monster. Look at this monster. I mean, it's just like, it's frustrating, I think, that like people can't wrap their minds around that other countries around the world do actually have valid security concerns, and that we don't have to like Russia or like Putin to acknowledge that, and to acknowledge that we played a significant role in escalating that to that point. I don't think that should be controversial, but apparently it still is. I don't know. The U.S. and West kept out fucking with Russians in 1991 since fucking 1919. You know, for 100 years, since the birth of the Soviet Union, we've been trying to destabilize and isolate and fuck with Russia. We took a little break during World War II as we correctly came down on the right side and were allies with Russia for that brief period. And then as soon as it was over, we transitioned right back into that Cold War mentality of trying to isolate and sanction and destroy them. So it's been 100 years of the West trying to like fuck with this country, despite that brief period where we were allies. And you can go further than that as well. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it goes back even further than that. But I think just it's a useful framework just to talk about the last 100 years. I think a pro-US but more honest argument would be that poking the bear was justified. I don't agree with that take. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of what some people get at, right? It's like, yeah, we were pumping arms into Ukraine, and yeah, we humiliated Russia in the 90s after the collapse of the Soviet Union, which led to this massive human rights disaster, but they deserved it. I mean, that would definitely be a more honest explanation of like, or a more honest distillation of like what this stance is and what it means. You know? So I don't think that should be that controversial to acknowledge. That is just even going, you know, we can go back as long as you want, but even just the last 10 years, I'm just pushing up against this red line, knowing full well that there was going to be a response eventually, and then when the response come, suggesting that it's some like black and white, good versus evil, Harry Potter kind of analogy is just preposterous. It's not historically or materially accurate. And ultimately, this is a viewpoint that promotes and upholds Western imperialism and hegemony. Yeah, just say you love killing people you think are communists and stop being cowards, or not even communists anymore, but just subhuman. Just say you consider everyone to the east of Ukraine just subhuman, and Ukraine is in this kind of gray area where they qualify as being the West. You know? And just admit that. I wish more people would just be more happy. And it seems like during the last year, people have become quite comfortable admitting that. People just don't view anyone to the east of Ukraine as being like human beings. Ugh. Anyway, folks, I've got about another hour to go. I really don't feel well, okay? So I've way more to get into. I have way more to look at. But I just don't know if I have it in me to do everything that I need to do today. But I just want to take this moment to remind folks that if you do enjoy this community, if you enjoy TRRS, if you enjoy tuning into this program each and every day here on Twitch, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, if you enjoy it, please subscribe. Please subscribe to the program. Get all the emotes. Get the very best emotes that are available on this whole platform. Be part of the very best community that's available on this whole platform. Like we were saying, it's very alienating to, I think, hold some of these foreign policy viewpoints if you're living in the West. It can feel very isolating and alienating. I know it's helped me a lot to connect with folks in this chat over the last year, to feel like we actually agree on this stuff, and there's a room to have sort of a dissident viewpoint on this. I know it's been helpful for some people in the community as well. So if you enjoy the content, you enjoy this kind of discussion, please subscribe and support the show. It's the best chat on Twitch. Thank you to our new valued community member, Eat Your Leftist As. Every little bit helps. This show is not funded by any state or any arms manufacturer or anything like that. Only through the generosity of the wonderful TRRS community members.
You can count on me. You're going to have a good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Content able to continue to air.
TRRS Sankara.
So please, if you can, subscribe to the show. I appreciate it a lot. It helps a lot. And I love you. So please subscribe. Just like Cauldron of Bats. Thank you, Cauldron of Bats. Oh, I'm not leaving yet. DD Game Boy. I kind of feel like leaving. I would like to just go and lie down right now, but I'm going to stick around a little bit longer. Thank you, Cauldron of Bats, for the 4 months of Tier 1. Thank you for that. If I didn't have the spot to rant and rave, I would likely lose my mind and drive my family insane.
You can count on me. You're going to have a good
absolutely.
old Rob to talk you through
Absolutely.
all this.
It's been very valuable for me, mentally even, to have this space and to have this community to have these discussions with at a time when you feel very isolated and alienated. And thank you, Carrier Wave, for the gifted sub to Pinch Snipers. Thank you for that. Maybe I can put on the little video. About the community. I'll see if maybe 1 or 2 more people might want to subscribe. I just don't have the energy to do a big pitch today. So, if you can subscribe, I appreciate it. Please do. Here's a little video to let you know what the community is about if you're not familiar or if you're on the fence.
You on board as a... Thank you for expressing interest in the Friendship Triangle community. We would be thrilled to have you on board as a member of our exclusive platform. As you may know, the Friendship Triangle is Twitch's only two-dimensional, triangle-shaped, friendship access and trickle-down cloud, tiered reward system. Today you have an amazing opportunity to join the base level of the Friendship Triangle system.
Old Dutch looks like he's offering
Once you are part of the
a...
community, you'll have the ability to rise through the ranks and achieve higher levels of access and rewards. One way to do this is
offering
by
a gifted
gifting
sub.
subscriptions to your fellow members or by inviting your friends and family members to join our community. As you ascend the tiers, you will be exposed to a range of new and exciting benefits, such as exclusive content, advanced features, and access to our elite community members. We are confident that you will enjoy all the perks that come with being part of the Friendship Triangle. However, we also want to remind you that not all friends and family members are to be trusted, especially those who may not support your new lifestyle. That's why we encourage you to focus on building meaningful relationships within our community, where you will find like-minded individuals who share your interests and values. If you have any questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out to our team. We are always here to support our members and ensure that your experience with the Friendship Triangle is enjoyable. We're glad that you are considering joining the Friendship Triangle community. We look forward to seeing you rise through the Chaos Zone and all the way into the Elite tier. It's not a cult.
That's right. That last part was very important. That last part is very, very important. In case Ice Tray, in case you were confused. It says it right there, exactly.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
Thank you, Ice Tray, for the gifted sub. Thank you, Dave Legend, for the 100 friend coin. Is there an appropriate place on the Discord to ask for theory about why the European and Western left is so lame, being aligned with the U.S.?
You're going to have good old Rob to
while
talk
claiming
you through
North
all
American,
this.
USSR, and China sympathizers are baby new leftists that discovered the left yesterday and don't know as much yet. I think really there's a number of places on the Discord where you can that would be appropriate. That's the exact. We have that kind of dialogue a lot on there. Diego, thank you for the 2 gifted subs. Thank you, Diego. I appreciate it.
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
Get a bottle of NyQuil, drink it all.
Thank you, Brian, for the 200 friend coin. Are we going to get your play-in game predictions? Like I was saying earlier, I'm like... I really am just paying attention to the Raptors, Bulls.
Use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
And I don't feel too confident about the Raptors' chances. It's been a very ugly and depressing season. So I don't know if I would be comfortable making any predictions. Thank you, Bleep Lord, for the 100 friend coin. Thank you for that.
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
Forehead smooch. I can't get sick.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for the the 300 friend coin and all the support. And for the foreheads.
Count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
The parasocial forehead smooch. Thank you. I don't know. I think the Raptors could win. I mean, the Raptors, the thing at Ice Tray, like with the Bulls or Miami, when they play like they're supposed to play, they look fucking great. They look like they can beat anybody. But it's just that's been few and far between this season. And it seems like they've just there's become a disconnection with Nurse and the locker room. So I just don't know. Like when they actually play well, they can beat anybody. And if they do get into the playoffs, I will probably talk myself into them beating the Bucks. But even though that's just delusional, I can acknowledge that's just purely delusional. Thank you, Old Dutch, for the gifted sub as well. Thank you, Old Dutch. I appreciate it a lot. We do have a hype train, so if there's anyone else that does want to subscribe to this program and support the content that I do here on Twitch, you can support this content and you can get all the wonderful hype train emotes that are available from Twitch. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool too. It's kind of a two birds with one stone sort of situation. I think I'm just gonna sit here. How many viewers can I maintain if I just kind of sit here and stare into the camera for a little while? I think that's mostly what I want to do. Am I doing Cyber Rob 27/7 tonight? I don't know. Maybe. I mean, I like playing the game, and now it's like when I turn it on, I feel like I might as well just stream. Like if I am playing it, maybe I can't. Maybe I'm not going to be able to stream like every single hour of the game though. So maybe I'll like move away from it a little. But I don't know. If I do sit down to play it tonight, I'll probably turn on the camera and throw it on. I feel like they're kind of built for the playoffs. People like to clown on the everyone is 6'8" thing, but they're going to shut Chicago down. It totally depends on whether they play within themselves, like whether they play like they're supposed to.
Thanks, I love Parenti, TRRS Parenti.
Oh hell yeah, DD Game Boy. Thank you for the 3 months tier 1. The yellow Parenti emote. There's a few Parenti emotes on Twitch, but I think this was one of the originals. So if you're a yellow Parenti supporter, or just if you enjoy Parenti in general, one good reason to subscribe. And we are close to this level 3 of this hype train. We got 30 seconds left. One generous chatter could possibly get us into level 3. And wouldn't that be exciting? Wouldn't that be so exciting? I know it would be for me. I know it would be for me, that's for sure. Thank you, Easel Cat. Thank you. I think six bits is basically the Twitch equivalent of just like throwing some change at someone's feet, but you know what? I'll take it.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Thank you, Dr. Maggot, for the gifted sub as well. Thank you, Dr. Maggot. Oh, okay. What else do we got here? It's all right. It's all right. Screw the hype train. Screw the hype train, Dr. Maggot. I appreciate the support. Thank you, Easel Cat. I appreciate it. Thank you. And I truly do appreciate everyone that supports this channel, supports this show, and allows me to continue to do this. I really, really do appreciate it a lot. For reals. I guess what else did I want to take a look? Oh, here's a little palate cleanser. By the way, I love how China has like grasped that to really have successful propaganda in America, you just need to show like viral videos of like people in rural China or pandas being like funny little guys as well. That's how they've discovered they need to win the hearts and minds of Americans, and it's working, frankly. Look at this little guy. Look at this little rascal. Hang in there, buddy. Whoa. That's good stuff. Aren't we a little panda deep inside? It's true. Absolutely. It do be like that. I bookmarked this, which I found funny. Just this random reply to Ash, aka Hitwoman, on Twitter, because I made this meme. I made this meme on my phone like 2 or 3 years ago, and it's amazing that I've seen it in the wild now a couple of times. This is someone that doesn't even follow me. This person doesn't even follow me. I made this meme on my phone like 2 or 3 years ago, so it's funny for me to see. When I see that in the wild, it's kind of an interesting, funny little feeling. Viral Rob once again. That's right. That's why I bookmarked that, just so I could talk about that. God, there's the whole Ukraine files thing. That would be good to get into. I wanted to look at this. This Chuck Todd interview with Michael McCall about, like, in case, because, you know, just as the Ukraine thing has ramped up and people say, well, you need to defend Ukraine's precious democracy and sovereignty, which, as we know, is just childish in and of itself in the first place, because it's not like Ukraine is going to be some democratic sovereign place. They're going to be basically a Western colony. You know, it's not like it's the choice between being invaded by Russia or being sovereign. They're not sovereign. They're not sovereign. It's a choice between being independent or being basically a Western colony. It's the same thing with Taiwan. And as much as people are going to say, as the Taiwan thing ramps up, oh, it's about sovereignty, it's about democracy, it's about defending our democratic partners in the region, we're defending against authoritarianism or whatever. But that's why I appreciate when these fucking imperialist ghouls just go on the media and just clearly outline exactly what it's about. They just clearly outline exactly what it's about, which I appreciate.
Make the basic case for why Americans not only should care about what happens in Taiwan, but should be willing to spill American blood and treasure to defend Taiwan.
Nobody wants that. I think the deterrence is key here. We travel to
you do
Japan,
want that,
South
sir.
Korea. We are in Guam. We're meeting with our allies, our partners here, if you will. They don't have a NATO in the Pacific, but they do have partners. We want to make sure that they
We're trying to create one
and supportive of the United States and Taiwan. The case for Taiwan, that's a very good question. About 50% of international trade goes through the international straits, but I think more importantly, you know, Chuck, is that the TSMC manufactures 90% of the advanced global supply of advanced semiconductor chips. If China invades and either owns or breaks this, we're in a world of hurt, you know, globally.
Congressman, it almost sounds like the case that would be made in the 60s, 70s, and 80s of why America was spending so much money and military resources in the Middle East. Oil was so important for the economy. Is this sort of the 21st century version of that?
You know, I personally, I think it's about democracy and freedom.
See, he backtracked. He let it slip out, and then he backtracked. Oh, yeah, it's about democracy and freedom. Sir, you just admitted that that's not what it's about. It's about economic interests. It's about semiconductor production. It's about destabilizing China. Sir, come on. Don't try and say that it's about democracy and freedom now. Come on now. And yeah, they have already sold off the whole country. I mean, that's just, for as much as people say, like, oh, it's about protecting sovereignty and democracy. It's just preposterous. So yeah, I do really appreciate when they're able to just like articulate this. I find that funny. There's this clip as well.
Chinese mainland.
There's this clip as well I wanted to look at. Oh, Lord.
The Chinese mainland is more democratic than Taiwan. The reason is clear. I'm speaking from my personal experience here. The Chinese mainland has a consultative system.
America loves democracy and freedom in Taiwan. That's why they supported Chiang Kai-shek. That's right. And that's why they supported brutal military dictatorships in South Vietnam and South Korea as well. You know, exactly. That's why they continue to build military bases to protect the Okinawans from dangerous Chinese threat, even when Okinawans are tired of U.S. military members committing murders and sexual assaults constantly and want the United States to leave their fucking island. Well, they're there for their own good. I saw a fucking brain dead analogy today as well, talking about Ukraine, saying just like that would be just like if America invaded Vietnam in the 60s, and it's like not supporting their ability to defend themselves. And it's like, well, first of all, these are two totally different things, considering America invaded Vietnam and America is arming and funding Ukraine. Suggesting that there's some analogy there is not accurate, considering America is behind both of these things. And yeah, why did America invade Vietnam? They invaded Vietnam to like stop the spread of communism because people were choosing an economic system that they didn't agree with. They were decolonizing their country using a political ideology that they found threatening, the American ruling class found threatening. That's why they prosecuted their genocidal war in Vietnam halfway around the fucking world, whereas Russia is next door neighbors to Ukraine, and the world's foremost military power and imperialist alliance, i.e. NATO, was pumping arms and funding into this country, politically interfering in the country with the express stated purpose of destabilizing Russia. So yeah, not exactly quite the same analogy when you look at the American invasion of Vietnam and the reasoning for it versus the Russian invasion of Ukraine, where again, you don't have to support it, but you can at least acknowledge though, and I don't think it should be that hard to acknowledge that some of these reasons were actually based on very real events that were happening, a very real effort on the part of the Western countries to push up against these red lines of Russia, a deliberate attempt to provoke them, which was not happening whatsoever in Vietnam. So it's a completely fucking ass backwards, ridiculous analogy.
Where the Communist Party is, the Chinese mainland is more democratic than Taiwan. The reason is clear. I'm speaking from my personal experience here. The Chinese mainland has a consultative system, where the Communist Party is the ruling party, but the 8 other democratic parties have the right to participate in politics. In Taiwan, it's an election system where whoever wins the election rules for 4 years or 8 years without much participation from other parties. When the Kuomintang is in charge, the DPP does not have the right to participate. This is why the opposition party is always trying to bring down the ruling party. When the DPP is...
I mean, it's that chauvinistic idea that the only kind of democracy that's real is Western-style liberal democracy, which, as we know from living in one of these systems, is extremely not democratic whatsoever.
In charge, they settled old scores with the KMT. When I was the chairman, the new party is the 3rd largest party, with 14% of the votes. Did I have the right to participate in politics? Not at all. So, if someone from Taiwan tries to argue with me, I'll say, who gave me the right to participate in politics? You call this a democracy? If my party was on the Chinese mainland, even though I'm not a member of the ruling party, I still have the right to participate in politics. Science and technology leaders on the mainland may not be members of the Communist Party, but because of their ability and qualifications, they have the right to participate in politics in important positions. This is democracy.
you can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
I had quesadillas for lunch.
Cool J, thank you for the 1 entire year of Tier 1. Thank you, Cool J. How is the quesadilla? Is that good? I'm happy to hear that. Here's a Mearsheimer thing. Hello, Ali and HD. Here's a Mearsheimer thing. Maybe we can finish with this. I don't have too much more energy, and I look and sound like shit, so maybe it's time for me to go after this. I took my mom out for lunch for her birthday. That sounds nice. Happy birthday to Mrs. Cool J, Mrs. Cool J. From all of us here in TRRS, in the TRRS community.
The Chinese understand full well what happens when you're weak in the international system. They call it the century of national humiliation. It lasted from the late 1840s to the late 1940s. As most of you know, I'm sure, China was very weak during that 100-year period. And you know what happened to them when they were very weak? The other great powers in the system, including the United States of America, preyed upon them. They were victimized at every turn. The Chinese understand full well, if you want to survive in the international system, you want to be really powerful. What about the Americans? I told you about the Americans before. The Americans do not tolerate peer competitors. We're not going to let China dominate Asia unless we absolutely have to. The United States is not simply containing China. We're talking about a rollback strategy. The United States, as many of you know, and probably many of you don't know, is a ruthless great power. You never want to underestimate how ruthless the United States is. Despite
especially
all the
if you're a
liberal
friend.
rhetoric that we use to cover up our ruthless behavior.
抖音
Heartbreaking. Local communists forced to agree with conservative. I mean, I think it's an example of how far off base a lot of the foreign policy analysis has gotten, that Mearsheimer gets framed as being some kind of like Putin sympathizer or tanky, just for basically saying true things about how America engages with the world, right? Just for pointing out obvious truths about how America engages with the world, and not obfuscating that with this kind of progressive rhetoric, not playing that game. That's why I appreciate Mearsheimer's analysis. Not that I agree with him politically about really anything. Oh, I think I gotta go, folks. I think I gotta go. I would like to stay longer. Like, there's more. I wanted to watch the Trump and Tucker Carlson thing. Let's watch the Trump. It's fitting with the dying empire thing. Let's watch the Trump and Tucker Carlson thing. I'm gonna power through this for another little bit. I'm sure it's gonna be funny. Let's do it. Let's do it. Where is it? It's over here. Why not? It's a dying empire, and having this like wacky senile game show host as someone with so much political clout leading a mass movement, there's nothing more fitting than that. So let's look at some of these comments from Trump in this Tucker Carlson interview.
People that work there, and I'll tell you, people were crying. People that work there, professionally work there, that have no problems putting in murderers, and they see everybody. It's tough place. And they were crying. They were actually crying. They said, I'm sorry. They'd say, 2024, sir, 2024.
Who is saying this? Trump loves the big, strong, tough guy. Was just in tears coming up to me at the way that I'm treated by the liberal media. They love doing that. Can I turn up the video volume? I turned it up a lot there. Turn it up a little bit there as well. Trump loves doing that. That's so funny. They're crying. They're crying while I'm being arrested. These big manly prison guards, they're crying to themselves.
And tears are pouring down their eyes. I've never seen anything like those people are phenomenal. Those are your police.
Yep.
Those are the people that work at the courthouse. They're unbelievable people. Many of them were in tears or close to it. Many apologists were sorry, sir. We're sorry. They had, and I'll tell you, people were crying. People that he said, but sir, why? Why? He goes, why? Literally, he said, but sir, why? Why? He goes, why, oh, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you'll have to figure that one out, Abdul. Literally, he said, but sir, why? The tents are very hard to take out. I said, they said, sir, the tents are very hard to take out. I said, I want the tents. I want the tanks. I want the planes. I want everything.
This is me.
I want the tanks.
Tanky Trump arc.
Tanks. I want the tanks.
I agree, sir. When there's a CIA-sponsored uprising in Hungary, this is what I have to say.
The tents. I want the tanks.
When there's the CIA is doing a color revolution, what do? Do you just let it happen, or do you do something else? Do you do this?
I want the tanks. I want the planes. I want everything. And a couple of them fought me on it. Like Millie, he said, sir, I think it's cheaper to leave the equipment behind. I said, let me ask you, we have a plane that cost $100 million. It's sitting there. All it needs is a tank of gas, right? Give me a little jet fuel. We'll fly it to Pakistan or any place else, or we'll fly it directly home. You say it's cheaper to leave a $100 million plane. Sir, I think overall it's cheaper. These are idiots we're dealing with. They said, sir, the tents are very hard.
Look at Trump is like imitating a dumb guy voice. He's just like me for real. Boo 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 boo. Sometimes he's very relatable. And it's funny, you see like Aaron Rupar saying he's calling the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff's Mark Milley an idiot. Yeah, it's liberal people like Aaron Rupar love to point out Trump W's as being like faux pas or whatever.
What did you say to him? Let me ask you, talk to Putin about Ukraine. What did you say to him?
I could see that he loved it. And I said...
he loved Ukraine.
He considers it to be a part of Russia.
Yeah.
I said, not when I'm president. We had a very good relationship. I mean, look, I was the worst thing that ever happened to him. I closed up his pipeline. You never heard the words Nord Stream 2 until I came along. Nord Stream 2 is their pipeline. And I had a great relationship with him, but it was very tough because they had a fake Russia investigation. And I told him, and he told me, he said, it's very hard for us to deal, don't you think? I said, very hard, because we have a fake investigation that turned out to be a fake. For 2 years it went on, and we could have done it.
Let me ask you, talk to Putin about Ukraine. What did you say to him?
I often say, they said to me the other day, one of your fellow journalists said, who's the biggest problem, sir? Is it China? Could it be Russia? Could it be North Korea? No, I said, the biggest problem is from within. It's these sick, radical people from within, because we can handle, if we're smart, we can handle Russia, China. I did. I took in billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars from China. No other president took in anything, and they respected me. He's the same thing, you know.
It's these sicko Democrats.
Taiwan. You can't do it. I won't tell you exactly what I said, but it was something that probably a lot of people wouldn't like if they heard it, but it was very tough. Don't go into Taiwan. If you do, we're going to have problems. Other than that, we're going to be great relationship. We're going to have a great relationship. And he said to me when I said we're going to do something, if he goes in, no, you wouldn't do it. I'll do that. I swear I'll do that. And he didn't believe me, but he believed me 10%. The same thing with Putin. I said I was going to do something really nasty.
It's so rambling.
If he goes into Ukraine. He said, no, you're not going to do that. I said, I will. And he didn't believe me either, but he believed me 10%. And
Yeah, I think a lot of it was a fabrication, old Dutch. I think the position that I always tried to hold, and I would actually be interested in going back and listening to some of my commentary from this at the time, which obviously is still around, but my commentary at the time was that, like, I'm sure that there's genuine things involving the weird connections that he and his team have to these, like, shady oligarchs and other, like, I'm sure that there was stuff there, corruption, that they could poke around at. But I think the fundamental premise that Russia cost Hillary Clinton the election, that was always something that I disagreed with. And it seemed like a lot of the people that promoted that narrative were operating from that assumption, which always was just preposterous. You know, they lost because they fucking blew it. I'm sure there were things that they could poke around at with the shady connections that they have to, like, you know, Paul Manafort and all that weird stuff. But, like, that's also probably pretty common in Washington amongst all parties. You know, it was more just a way to go after Trump. Yeah, just run-of-the-mill international real estate corruption. Exactly.
The 10%, you never heard talk about going into Ukraine. You never heard talk about going into Taiwan until I was no longer there.
I have no doubt that that shit is going to... I mean, he continued arming Ukraine. He continued arming Ukraine that whole time. So this idea that he's been better on that is just not accurate. He continued that program of arming and funding these Ukrainian militias and funding this civil war while he was president. So...
caricatured as an extremist, we think you'll find what he has to say moderate, sensible, and wise. For a man who...
Well, how much is this? Oh, man, there's so much. I don't know if I can do this. Let's continue.
The weaponry today is so powerful. This isn't like Second World War where we have army tanks running around shooting each other. This is weapons the likes of which the world has never seen before. The weaponry today...
I mean, America bombed Japan with the nuclear weapon at the end of World War II.
Listen to people talk about... when I listen to people talk about global warming, that the ocean will rise in the next 300 years by 1/8 of an inch, and they talk about this is our problem. Our big problem is nuclear warming. I mean, nobody even talks about it. The environmentalists talk about all this nonsense in many cases. Look, I'm an environmentalist also, I guess, in my own way, because I've done a good job with the environment, but nobody talks about nuclear, the problem we have, the biggest problem we have in the whole world. It's not global warming, it's nuclear warming.
That's a great cutaway reaction shot to that nonsensical statement. What even is that? I've never heard that before. Nuclear warming. What is that? I have never heard that before. Is that just something he's making up on the spot?
When I watch all of the people talking about Ukraine and how's Ukraine doing, blah, 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 Russia's sitting back. First of all, Ukraine's being obliterated.
Yes.
Okay, let's not even talk nuclear. But let's say it wasn't. Let's say they were doing better than anticipated. If he decided to use his second form of destruction, which is nuclear, that's the end of that. You understand?
That's
and
true.
I know where
yeah.
you are in Ukraine, so I mean, you
that would be the end of that.
Most people don't. Most people don't even talk about it. They don't talk about the fact that he has equal to the United States in nuclear capability and destruction. And so I watch all of this happening, and it's so sad.
But can I
call it the N-word? You have two N-words. You don't mention either one of them. The nuclear word you don't mention because the power is so destructive. I met with professors at
There
MIT,
you go, pinch snipers.
and I was preparing for a debate. I wouldn't say it was a long preparation, but I did want to talk about nuclear because I consider it to be the single greatest threat the world has, far greater than global warming, like not even a contest. I call it the N-word.
That's another just out of context clip.
I call it the N-word. Take a look at Saudi Arabia. Look at what happened. They're great people.
This is what happens when you touch the orb.
He goes over and gets a fist bump. You know what a fist bump means? Don't shake my hand because your hand's dirty. That's what a fist bump is. They got it. They were so insulted.
That's why Saudi is moving away from
shake your hand. Let's go fist bump.
America and American empire.
You take a look at
the fist bump.
Saudi Arabia. Look at what happened.
That's why.
He won an election. You know, it always goes. I got the most votes of any person, any sitting president in history. I was told if I got 15 million less, I couldn't lose. They're surrounded by vicious, smart people, radical left people, but they're very smart and they're very vicious. It's not him. It's not him. He's now in Ireland. He's not going to have a news conference. When the world is exploding, I own property in Ireland. I'm not going to Ireland. The world is exploding around us. You could end up in a third world war, and this guy's going to be in Ireland and not having a news conference. He hasn't had a news conference, I guess, in months. I saw today.
Trump never did conferences. He famously never did those news conferences. And again, you're foolish though if you think Trump is going to steer America away from a third world war, is going to be better on foreign policy. You're a huge sucker if you're one of the people that believe that. Which I know there's a lot of those folks out there, and I feel like were dropped on their heads as kids or something.
And then you've had Andrew McCarthy, you've had Jonathan Turley, Greg Jarrett.
This time the conservatives will be anti-war, bro. I swear, bro.
And they're down the middle people. They see it. They say there's no crime, there's no anything. Think of it, Tucker. I've been through 7 years of bull investigations. They've all come out and said it. And then you've had Andrew McCarthy, you've had Jonathan Turley, Greg Jarrett, Dershowitz, all of them, everybody and they're down the middle people. They see it. They say there's no crime, there's no anything. Think of it, Tucker. I've been through 7 years of bull investigations. They've all millions and millions of pages, and they get you on a non-disclosure agreement. I mean, big numbers, billions and billions of dollars, right?
I don't know where it is. Is it Mar-a-Lago? I'm not sure.
Perfect non-disclosure agreement, where they get you on nothing. A friend of mine who's a big business guy said, you have to be the most honest guy in the world, because
everyone says this about Donald Trump.
You have in those big numbers,
honesty, unmatched honesty,
and you have millions and millions of pages, and they get you on a non-disclosure agreement. I mean, that Russia and
this should be an example of anyone that thinks Trump's going to be some kind of fucking anti-imperialist.
And President Obama didn't go over the red line, and because of that, Russia took over Syria, and there's a whole big thing, right? You know that. If Obama would have done what he said he was going to do, because they were killing children. They were killing children with gas bombs, by the hundreds, by the thousands in Syria. And he said, if that happens again, and it happened a number of times, and he still never went over the line.
Frankly, that's the one thing that tickles my conspiracy part of my brain when it comes to Syria. The fact that Obama said, let me be clear, I'm establishing this red line, and we're not going to intervene unless these chemical attacks are used. And then lo and behold, immediately afterwards, such an attack does take place. Maybe that's just a coincidence, and maybe it happened exactly as they said, but that's always been something that the timing seemed kind of weird to me. And anyway, for people that think Trump's some anti-war guy or anti-imperialist, here he is saying that America didn't go far enough in Syria, arming and funding these jihadists to fight a proxy war there, just as they're doing in Ukraine. Trump contributed to this. He contributed to it in Syria. He contributed to it in Ukraine. He's not anti-war.
But I did. So I shot 57 missiles, almost every one of them hit, into a military area, which had a lot of planes, wiped out a lot of planes. Also had Russian soldiers, by the way. They say I was so nice to Russia, right? I killed the pipeline. I sadly killed a lot of Russian soldiers, that 500 group, because they were doing things that they weren't supposed to.
And then Aaron Rupar, of course, uses that as like a gotcha. I sadly killed a lot of Russian soldiers because Aaron believes that America should be, in fact, continuing to kill Russian soldiers. That's viewed as a bad thing by Aaron. Thank you, James, for the gifted sub. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Oh, who's sniffing more? Robert Trump. Oh, this is funny. This is funny. Look how easy it is to manipulate Americans, or Trump in particular. Like, people think that Trump can, like, negotiate with President Xi or whatever. Look how fucking easy he is to manipulate. Watch this.
I dealt with President Xi. I was with him the whole weekend. He had an incredible, I'm not allowed to say it because it's very impolite and very politically incorrect, a beautiful female interpreter. She was very beautiful. Today, if you say it, they'll say, this is terrible. You're not allowed to say that. But she was very professional. She spoke every word for him.
Oh, God. Some great reaction shots on this one. Oh, my God. The beautiful female interpreter. It's so easy to manipulate this guy. It's hilarious.
He only dealt through an interpreter. The only word I ever heard him say was repeat. That's an unusual word. I said,
how smart is he? Could you tell?
Top of the line.
Top of the line.
Yeah, they're all top of the line. Our guy's not top of the line. Never was.
Sometimes he says it like it is, folks. President Xi, China, the beautiful. Top of the line. Our guys, not so much. You know, he's right. Let him cook. A rare Trump W. That's right.
These are top of the line people at the top of their game. President Xi is a brilliant man.
That's a great sound alert. And I know people don't like this either. I'm sure Aaron Rupar is very happy about this.
Top of the line people at the top of their game.
Let's hear that one more time, sir. President Xi, what do you think about him?
President Xi is a brilliant man.
You heard it here first, folks. Sometimes he gets it right, okay? We don't like the guy. But we can acknowledge that sometimes he gets it right.
If you went all over Hollywood to look for somebody to play the role of President Xi, you couldn't find it. There's nobody like that. The look, the brain, the whole thing. We had a great relationship. You know, when he first came to Mar-a-Lago, he came the first day, he was there for a few days. We were going to have it was so organized by them and by us, but by them. Very boom, boom, boom.
Oh my God.
Business, no games, you know. They don't say, gee, how did the Yankees do last night? Oh, that was a wonderful. They don't care. They don't care about anything. I said, do you ever go to a Broadway play? I'll take you to one. Do you ever have plays like, do you ever go? No, I don't. No.
He likes Broadway plays. He likes Les Mis.
He's a very smart Putin. Very smart. Now, he's had, and probably a bad year. Don't forget, that whole thing is not, if he took over all of Ukraine. And what are we going to do? Because Biden is so committed to Ukraine.
These people get so mad when he says anything positive about Russia or Ukraine or anything. Okay, there we go. We made it through. That was funny. I don't know. Did we learn anything? No, not really, but it's funny to see him do the classical Trump word salad. President Xi, have you ever seen Cats? Have you ever seen Cats? Okay, I did it. I hung on for another 30 minutes, folks. I made it to the 3-hour mark. Close, anyway. 3 minutes away. Thanks for joining the stream. One final opportunity for people that enjoy the stream and enjoy the content to subscribe. The only way this content remains on the air is by through the generosity of the viewers and the listeners who subscribe to this program and support the work that I do. So please, if you can, subscribe. I really appreciate everyone that is able to support this show and this content. I really, really appreciate it.
Okay,
a
Rob.
lot.
Seriously, wow.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Calm like a Tom. Holy Lord. Calm like a Tom. Thank you for the extremely generous 10 gifted subs. And somehow Ali in HD dodged all the subs. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Ali. I'm sorry. Calm like a Tom. That was extremely generous.
Good old Rob.
And then another gifted sub to Ali. Thank you, Calm like a Tom. Holy shit. I really appreciate that. Very, very kind of you. Thank you. I mean, shit, I don't want to get greedy or anything. And now it's so close to the goal, though. But, you know, of course, I'm not going to get... I would never dream of getting greedy or to, you know, suggest that, you know, people should subscribe to the show even more. Even when I've exceeded any expectations that I had. Would never even dream of doing that. Let me find someone we can raid here. Find me somebody to raid. Find me somebody to raid. Find. Let's see what I got here. What do we got? We got Dan Simpson. We got Sean Vids. Sometimes I like to raid him. We've got Hildebeest as well. Just tuned in at the perfect time, Brandon. Thank you, folks. Thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in. I'm gonna rest for a little bit. I'm gonna go pick up some McDonald's. Go pick up my kid from school, get some McDonald's. It's McDonald's Wednesday, as you know. I'll be back tomorrow. I had Dagwoods and now I'm getting McDonald's. It's a delivery heavy day today. So thank you for watching. Thank you, seriously, thank you everyone. No, I'm not getting to McDonald's delivery. I'm going to go drive. Thank you everyone for supporting the show. I really appreciate it. Hopefully tomorrow I'm going to be feeling a little better. Obviously a little under the weather still. But this was a great episode. I enjoyed hanging out with you all. I'll be back tomorrow. I'm getting my haircut tomorrow too. Sometimes I like to surprise people, but if you tune in tomorrow at noon Eastern, I'm going to have a fresh haircut. So tune in tomorrow, noon sharp. At the crack of noon, tune in and you'll see Haircut Rob. Okay?